The rain beat against the glass, but the real storm was wearing a midnight blue dress. Imagine the silence of a penthouse right before it burns. Arya Stone spent 5 years in the dark, crafting a titan's empire, but tonight she steps into the light on the arm of the city's most dangerous man. Watch as the camera pans across a ballroom of 400 elites right before a shattered wife turns a glamorous gala into a public corporate execution. Every empire falls. But this one was unbuilt from the inside.
She was the architect of his entire kingdom, and he chose to replace her with his secretary. Now she intends to incinerate that kingdom. The catalyst was a single text on Victor's phone. "Meet me at the penthouse." His wife, Arya, however, was the one to read it. For 5 years, she had been the unseen force behind Victor Hale's billion-dollar conglomerate. The intellect, the strategist, the entire operation. He was now attempting to erase her existence. But Victor made a singular, fatal error. He forgot that the one who forges the armor knows precisely where its vulnerabilities lie. If you seek a masterclass in retribution, you have arrived. Like this video, comment with your city, and witness the fallout. Outside Hale Tower, a literal storm was gathering. Arya Stone stood within Victor's private office on the 42nd floor, a spectral figure against the maelstrom raging outside. In her hand was his phone, carelessly left behind after he feigned an emergency board meeting 20 minutes prior. "Meet me at the penthouse. Can't wait anymore, Al." The message had appeared just 3 minutes ago. Arya stared at it until the characters blurred. L for Lena Cross, Victor's 24-year-old assistant, whose saccharine smile and cheap perfume lingered in the hallways. The astonishing part was the absolute stillness of Arya's hands. After 5 years of marriage, her body chose this moment to become perfectly calm. She scrolled upward, discovering a chronicle of his deception stretching back months. "Miss you already. Tonight was perfect. He's working late again. More time for us." Arya had processed enough. She placed the phone back in its exact spot, its screen illuminated like a glowing confession. She wanted him to discover it precisely as she had. Then she departed. The elevator's descent felt interminable. 42 floors was just enough time to witness the last 5 years of her life shatter. The endless nights in this very building, salvaging his flawed business concepts, the Castellon Industries merger, her design, the offshore accounts, her architecture, the European market conquest, her contacts, her talent, her 3 a.m. calls. She orchestrated everything from the periphery. "You're too brilliant for the spotlight," he would tell her with a kiss to her forehead. "Let me be the face. You be the brains." And she, foolishly, had believed him. The elevator doors finally slid open. In the parking garage, the sole sound was the sharp report of her heels on the concrete as she approached her car, a Mercedes he had gifted her 2 years ago. "Only the best for my wife," he had declared. Arya entered, ignited the engine, and remained motionless. The rain hammered the roof, its sound reverberating through the structure. Her breath came in quick, shallow bursts. She retrieved her own phone and opened her contacts. Her thumb paused over a single name: Marco Velez. This man, Marco, was Victor's principal rival. He had relentlessly tried to recruit her for 3 straight years, ever since discerning she was the true genius behind Hale Enterprises' meteoric rise. He had offered her a vice president position on 2 occasions. She had declined both times. "Loyalty," she had stated at some opulent party where Victor had abandoned her to network. "It holds meaning for me." Marco had simply regarded her with a look of prescient knowledge. Loyalty is a virtue until it is betrayed. Arya initiated the call. He answered on the second ring. Arya Stone, to what do I owe the pleasure? Is your offer still valid? A brief silence, then, which one? The partnership, the VP role, it's all yours. That is contingent. Not what has changed. Arya merely observed the rain streaking down her windshield. Everything. Marco's office was the complete antithesis of Victor's. Where Victor's was cold metal and glass, Marco's was rich with dark wood, aged leather, and actual books, not mere props. It felt authentic. He poured her a scotch without asking. You look like you could use this. Arya accepted the glass but did not drink. I require information first. Regarding what? Victor's investors. The major one he's pursued for 6 months, the one essential for his solvency. Marco leaned on his desk, appraising her. He was older than Victor by perhaps a decade, with silver at his temples and smile lines that seemed earned. Dante Moretti. The name landed with the force of a shockwave. The Dante Moretti, Arya felt compelled to clarify. Is there another? The man was a veritable legend. Dante Moretti's empire was a blend of legitimate enterprises and ventures one did not inquire about. Casinos, real estate, and security firms of terrifying competence. He was immensely wealthy, powerful, and averse to public attention. Victor has been attempting to secure a meeting for months, Marco clarified. Moretti seeks to legitimize some of his capital. Victor believes landing him will render Hale Enterprises invincible. Has he secured the meeting? Not even close. Moretti does not grant audiences to just anyone. Arya finally took a sip of the scotch. Its burn was a welcome sensation. I must secure that meeting before he does. Marco's eyebrows rose in surprise. You intend to meet Dante Moretti? Correct. For what reason? Because Victor's empire was constructed with my intellect, and I will dismantle it with my own hands. To achieve this, I require a partner, someone Victor cannot intimidate, cannot purchase, and cannot command. She met Marco's gaze directly. I need someone more dangerous than my husband. The office was utterly silent for a moment. Then his sharp smile returned. You have changed. No, Arya countered. I have simply ceased pretending. Arranging a meeting with Dante Moretti was remarkably simple. Marco placed a single call. 2 days later, an invitation arrived for dinner at Aurelio, the kind of establishment where menus lack printed prices. That afternoon, she acquired a black dress, streamlined, severe, and utterly unlike the feminine styles Victor favored. Her hair was pulled back tightly, her only adornment diamond studs. She was attired for conflict. Dante Moretti was already seated when she arrived. The host guided her to a secluded table where a man in his early 40s sat with a stillness that radiated power. He wore a dark suit, possessed even darker eyes, and had a face that was handsome in a cold, analytical manner. He rose as she approached, a gesture of old-world courtesy. Miss Stone, Mr. Moretti, please. She took her seat. A waiter materialized, poured wine, and then dissolved into the background. Marco holds you in very high esteem, Dante began. Marco requires something from me. Of course he would speak favorably. A faint trace of a smile touched Dante's lips. So, what is it you want? Arya valued his directness. Protection, credibility, and entry into circles I cannot access alone. And what do you offer in return? Intelligence, strategy, and the total dissolution of Hale Enterprises, from every hidden liability to every skeleton in its foundation. She paused. And I know where they all are. because I was the one who buried them. Dante sipped his wine, his face a mask of neutrality. You seek revenge on your husband. I want what is rightfully mine. There is a distinction. Is there? Revenge is an emotional act. What I propose is a business transaction. This time, a genuine smile emerged. You are a fascinating woman, Miss Stone. I am a useful one, Mr. Moretti. There is a distinction. He leaned back, observing her with those sharp, strategic eyes. Victor Hale has pursued a meeting with me for 6 months. He has presented some very generous proposals. He is desperate. Desperate men make promises they cannot honor. And you can? I can do more. I can provide you the blueprint to deconstruct his company and acquire its valuable assets. I can show you what is substantive and what is merely an illusion. Arya held his gaze without flinching. I built that company, Mr. Moretti. I know precisely how to unbuild it. Dante remained silent. The delicate sound of glassware and the low murmur of wealthy patrons filled the space. What kind of protection are you referring to? He finally inquired. The kind that is symbolized by a ring. His expression remained unchanged. You wish to marry me? No. I want the world to believe I am going to marry you. I need access to rooms from which I am currently barred. I need Victor to view me as someone he can no longer touch. I need his entire social sphere to see me aligned with a man they all fear. This would be a public spectacle or a deathbed arrangement. She allowed the implication to settle. It would be a strategic alliance, temporary, and mutually beneficial. You are proposing a fabricated engagement. Yes, that is audacious. It is strategic. Dante simply regarded her for another long moment before lifting his wine glass. Tell me about the gala. A cold fire ignited within Arya. Which one? The annual Hale Enterprises event, the grand stage where Victor showcases his triumphs to every influential figure on the East Coast. It is in 6 weeks, and Victor will be accompanied by his secretary. It was a statement, but Arya responded, yes. And what outcome do you desire at this gala, Miss Stone? Arya recalled the text. Tonight was perfect. She considered 5 years of relentless work, elevating a nobody into a king while she remained a specter. She remembered his claim that the shadows were for her protection. I want him to see me, she said, her voice low but incisive. Truly see me, not as his wife, not as the hidden intellect he concealed. I want him to see all that he discarded, and I want every person in that room to watch him comprehend it. Dante gave a slow, deliberate nod. Then we have an accord. He extended his hand across the table. Arya shook it. His grasp was solid and warm. One stipulation, he said, his hand still holding hers. When this concludes, you will come to work for me. Not as an asset, nor as a hidden blade, but as an equal. The motive? I only align with these of my caliber, and you, Miss Custone, possess a fire you have yet to truly witness. In that moment, a mechanism within Arya turned, a part of her soul so long seized with rust she had forgotten its existence. Agreed, she whispered. The subsequent 4 weeks were a maelstrom of calculated action. Arya abdicated the gilded prison she occupied with Victor, relocating not to a space of her own, but directly into Dante's orbit, a sleek, modern spire in the heart of the financial district. The optics, after all, were more potent if they shared a fortress. Victor was certainly aware of the void she left. He was acutely aware. Her phone vibrated 17 times on the first day. She allowed each call to expire. On the 18th attempt, she answered. "Where are you?" His rage was a tightly coiled spring in his voice. "I am leaving you, Victor." A profound, leaden silence occupied the line, then a fractured, "What?" "The divorce is moving forward. The papers will arrive tomorrow." "Arya, this is madness. Whatever you are considering, I am not considering. I am certain." Her tone was a flat line, devoid of emotion. I saw the messages. A second silence descended, heavier than the first. "It is not what it appears to be," he finally articulated. "Do not dare insult my intelligence." "Arya, allow me to explain." She severed the connection. The documents were delivered to Hale Enterprises the following morning. When Victor called again, his number was already blocked. He charged Marco's office, only to be intercepted by building security. He dispatched flowers. She had them redirected to a pediatric ward. He inundated her inbox. She created a filter to reroute his words to digital oblivion. And amidst his frantic unraveling, she commenced her work. With a chillingly sharp focus, she began the teardown. Leveraging Marco's network and Dante's protection, Arya started the systematic demolition of the empire she had helped construct. She exhumed every document, every agreement, every non-disclosure she had endorsed, every single strategy she had authored, all the intellectual property that was rightfully hers, yet filed under his corporate banner because he had requested it, and because she had once been naive enough to trust. "You will require legal counsel," Marco noted, observing her assault on a mountain of paperwork. "I have 3. "You will require superior ones." Dante materialized in the doorway, his voice like gravel. "What she requires is Jessica Chen." Arya's head shot up. "The Jessica Chen? Is there another?" Jessica Chen was a titan of corporate law, the woman credited with forcing 2 Fortune 500 CEOs to their knees to repay every dollar they had misappropriated. She was costly, ruthless, and terrifyingly effective. "A case of this nature isn't her typical engagement," Arya countered. "Yours will be." Dante entered the room. "I made an inquiry, cashed in a favor." "For what reason?" "I safeguard my investments." The statement was not one of ownership, but of cold, hard fact. Arya felt a peculiar tremor deep within her, a sensation she immediately suppressed. This was a transaction, nothing more. Jessica Chen arrived 2 days later, a petite woman in her 50s with eyes like surgical steel. For 3 consecutive hours, she dissected Arya's documentation, her inquiries cutting directly to the core of the matter. Finally, she closed the last folder and met Arya's gaze. "You possess an ironclad case, a profoundly solid one." "Define solid." "Solid to the degree that Victor Hale will lament the day he was born for forgoing a prenuptial agreement." A clean, sharp feeling, akin to satisfaction, washed through Arya. "What is my next course of action?" "Allow me to execute my strategy. You continue to amass evidence, and for what you have in mind for that gala." Jessica's smile was a thin, predatory line. "Ensure it is a spectacle." The invitation came 3 weeks before the night on cardstock so heavy it felt like a weapon. "You are cordially invited to the annual Hale Enterprises Gala." It was delivered to Dante's address, a calculated move. Victor must have reviewed the attendance list, noted the name Dante Moretta, and salivated at the prospect of securing a meeting. The single critical detail he could not have anticipated was that Dante's guest for the evening would be his own estranged wife. It was a masterful narrative turn. "Are you prepared for this?" Dante inquired. They were in his study. He had insisted she occupied the desk by the window, citing the superior light. She had ceased to argue. Dante was not a man who made empty gestures. "No," Arya admitted with stark honesty, "but I will proceed nonetheless. Fear can be a potent catalyst. I am not afraid of Victor. I never suggested you were." Dante rested against the desk's edge. "I said fear is a catalyst. The fear of regressing to the person you once were, of allowing that man to prevail, of remaining a specter in your own life." Arya met his stare. "Is that what animates you?" "On occasion." He paused. "My primary motivator is the deep satisfaction of observing arrogant men discover their own mortality." "That seems quite philosophical for a man in your profession." "My profession necessitates a great deal of philosophy. Without it, one is left with only currency and violence." A faint smile touched Arya's lips. In the preceding weeks, she had learned Dante Moretti was a study in contradictions. Undeniably dangerous, yet also deliberate, precise, and possessed of a dry wit that consistently disarmed her. "And what follows the gala?" she found herself asking. "You emerge immensely wealthy, exceptionally powerful, and completely liberated. And what of you?" "I acquire a partner of formidable talent who will facilitate my entry into markets I have long coveted." His gaze locked onto hers. "Unless you are reconsidering." "Not for a moment." "Good, because I have already procured your attire." Arya blinked. "You have what?" "The gown." "For the gala. It is custom made." Noting her expression, he clarified, "Did you imagine I would permit you to enter that viper's nest in something generic? You are my fiancé. Perception is paramount. I can acquire my own gown." "I am aware, but this one I wish to provide." He pushed away from the desk, crossing to a garment bag on his door. "Consider it a component of the investment." Arya rose slowly, closed the space between them, and unfastened the bag. The dress within was the color of a starless night, nearly black, with a silhouette that conveyed authority, not allure. It was perfect. "Dante?" "Try it on. If it does not feel like you, we will find an alternative." It did not feel wrong. When she emerged from the adjoining bathroom 15 minutes later, she observed a subtle shift in Dante's expression. It was minute, but she saw it. "Well?" she prompted. "You are going to utterly dismantle him," Dante stated, his voice low. It was not an inquiry. It was a prophecy. 2 weeks before the event, Victor launched a final, desperate gambit. He appeared at Dante's building, somehow bypassing its formidable security, and began pounding on her apartment door at 11 o'clock at night. Arya was completely by herself. Dante was at a business dinner across the city. She peered through the peephole to see Victor, impeccably dressed in a suit that cost more than a vehicle, his face a carefully constructed mask of composure. She unlatched the door. "Sti Arya." He spoke her name as if it were a benediction. "Please, just permit me to explain." "There is nothing left to explain." 5 minutes. It is all I ask." She knew she should refuse, should secure the door in his face, but she required this closure, this final observation of him, before she set his world ablaze. 5 minutes, she conceded. He crossed the threshold, his gaze absorbing the apartment's high-end appointments, the sprawling city views, the undeniable markers of a life entirely separate from his own. So, this is your new residence? It is. With him? Yes. A muscle began to pulse in Victor's jaw. You are making a colossal error. The sole error I made was placing my trust in you. Lena, that was a lapse in judgment. It was meaningless. Arya's laugh was genuine and raw. A lapse that persisted for 6 months? I was planning to terminate it. You were planning to do nothing, Victor. You intended to keep her and keep me and maintain the charade that you were the mastermind behind Hale Enterprises when we both know the true narrative. I never failed to credit your contributions. Contributions? The word was a trigger, and any residual warmth in Arya's voice evaporated, replaced by absolute frost. I constructed that company from its foundation. Every major acquisition, every strategic realignment, every maneuver that saved you from insolvency. That was my work, and you were content to let me operate from the shadows because it gratified your ego. I was shielding you. The board, the investors, they would have devoured you. You mean they would have discerned that you were a complete imposter without me? The charge hung between them like a guillotine's blade. Victor's face drained of color, then flooded with pure rage. You ungrateful! I created you. I gave you all of this. You gave me nothing I did not earn tenfold, and now I am reclaiming it. You would not dare. He advanced on her, and for the first time, Arya saw the true predator behind his eyes. I will orchestrate your complete downfall. Do you believe Dante Moretti instills fear in me? I shall release every transaction, every pact, every morally ambiguous action you have ever undertaken, that I performed under your direction, bearing your signature, under your name. Arya's lips curved into a slight smile. You see, this is the inherent risk of having a phantom build your enterprise, Victor. The phantom knows precisely where every body is buried. I will challenge you. I will ensnare you in litigation for a decade. You will be defeated, and you are aware of this. The door swung wide. Dante entered, assessing the tableau in an instant. Victor, positioned far too close. Arya, pressed against a wall but unyielding. Mr. Hale? Dante's tone was unnervingly placid. I have no recollection of extending you an invitation. Victor spun around. For one fleeting moment, Arya witnessed unadulterated terror in his eyes. He suppressed it swiftly, inflating his chest. This is a matter between my wife and myself. Your soon-to-be former wife, Arya countered. And her position is unambiguous. She has no desire to speak with you, Dante went on. Therefore, I will request, just this once, that you depart. This is not concluded, Victor seethed, his gaze fixed upon Arya. Yes, she replied softly. It is. Victor exited with force. Dante shut the door and engaged the deadbolt. Are you all right? Yes. Then Arya perceived she was trembling. It was not from fear, but from the raw, unbridled fury she had contained. I am fine. No, you are not. Sit. She complied. Dante poured her a scotch from the superior bottle he kept near the window. He is deeply afraid, Dante observed, offering her the glass. That is astute. Dante's voice was a low vibration. A frightened man is an erratic creature, as is a woman driven by a need for retribution. A knowing smile graced his lips. A valid point. A profound, weighty silence enveloped the space. Beyond the window, the city lights dissolved into a cosmos of 1,000,000 souls, oblivious to the two of them poised on the precipice. 2 weeks, Arya whispered. Dante's response was an unequivocal vow. 2 weeks, her voice was unsteady. I can manage this. I am certain you can, he affirmed, pausing for a beat. But you are not required to endure this ordeal alone. Her gaze finally settled on him, truly perceiving the stranger who had encircled her with his name and influence like a protective ward. He sought nothing but to be at her side as everything was brought to ruin. Why? She breathed. What is your motive for this? He feigned ignorance. For what? This. Assisting me. You could have simply provided the information and allowed me to wage my own war against Victor. Why place yourself directly in the path of conflict? Dante gazed out at the cityscape for a long interval. Because I comprehend the feeling of investing your very essence into creating something, only to have another person affix their name to it. I understand what it is to be dismissed due to your lineage, your history, or the individuals you were foolish enough to trust. His dark, penetrating eyes locked back onto hers, and I recognized the precise moment a person resolves that they have endured enough. A silent accord crackled between them, a bond forged far deeper than contracts and deceptions. Thank you, was all Arya could articulate. Do not thank me yet, he said, his voice gentle. Wait until our victory is secured. The night preceding the operation, sleep was an impossibility. Arya stood by the window of his apartment, her sanctuary she now conceded, observing the city's hum, a life with which she felt no connection. Tomorrow, her entire world would fracture. Tomorrow she would enter that opulent hall on Dante Moretti's arm and witness the implosion of Victor's reality. Tomorrow she would cease to be a ghost. Her phone vibrated in her grasp. A message from Jessica Chen. The instrument is prepared. I will see you tomorrow. A second vibration. Marco. The board is on the verge of collapse. I am bringing refreshments. A third. Dante. The silence is too pronounced for me as well. Join me on the roof. Arya retrieved a jacket. The elevator's ascent feeling like a slow journey to an execution. He was there, a silhouette against the metropolis, his tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He appeared younger in this state, his defenses momentarily lowered. Are you nervous? He inquired, his words carried on the wind. Fear. That was an encouraging indication. Why? It signifies you are invested in the result. It signifies this is not merely about retribution. Arya joined him at the precipice. Then what is it about? She believed she heard him murmur. Justice, liberty, the opportunity to construct something that is entirely your own. He met her gaze directly. And yes, a measure of revenge. But that is not the primary motivation. She gave a small laugh. You are inept at motivational speeches. I am not here to deliver one. I am here to remind you of your original purpose. He turned to fully face her. Victor Hale appropriated 5 years of your existence, your creations, your confidence. Tomorrow you reclaim it all with interest. That is not vengeance. It is simple arithmetic. Justice is a form of mathematics, Arya whispered, recalling their initial meeting. Precisely. They stood in the cold air, the city laid out beneath them like a fractured reflection. Arya could envision the entire sequence, the gown, the ballroom, the expression on Victor's face when he would see her and finally comprehend the magnitude of his error. What if it does not succeed? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. It will not fail, but what if? Arya? Dante's tone was pure resolve. It will be effective. You have anticipated every possible contingency. The proof is irrefutable. The legal team is prepared. The board is already unsettled due to the rumors Marco has circulated. Jessica has 3 key investors poised to withdraw the instant we signal. He allowed that to resonate. You have engineered the ideal snare. Your only remaining task is to trigger it. And if he retaliates, let him, Dante stated. The more he resists, the more pitiable he will appear. His expression softened, a rare fissure in his emotional armor. You are not the woman he discarded, Arya. You are not even the woman who approached me 6 weeks prior. You have reshaped yourself into something he cannot harm, cannot command, and cannot possess. And tomorrow you will demonstrate to him precisely what that entails. A quiet assurance settled within her, solid and tangible. I am prepared, she declared. I know. They remained on that rooftop as the first trace of dawn colored the horizon, conversing through the night about the event, the future, and the empire he intended for them to build upon the ruins. And for the first time in 5 torturous years, Arya felt whole, not a wife, not a ghost, simply Arya, forged in betrayal, sharp as a razor and poised to reclaim her life. The gala was 12 hours hence. The anticipation was nearly unbearable. Dawn arrived like a sudden impact. Arya was awake at 6, vibrating with anxious energy. She attempted to consume breakfast, but the toast felt like pulp. Coffee was her sole companion. A 3rd cup seemed vital. By 8, the apartment had been converted into a command center. Jessica Chen was the first to arrive, her 2 briefcases and tailored suit projecting an image of a corporate executioner. A nervous young paralegal named David followed, transforming the dining table into a central operations hub. We initiate our move at 7 o'clock this evening, Jessica announced, her documents arranged like tactical charts. Victor delivers his address at 7:30. We strike at 7:45. Why the 15-minute delay? Arya queried. Because we require him to be at his apex, arrogant, assured. The middle of his speech is optimal. Jessica's smile was a thin shard of ice. The greater the ascent, the more severe the fall. Marco appeared at 9 with pastries no one ate, and an enthusiasm that felt completely alien to Arya. He was like a child on Christmas morning. I have anticipated the immolation of Victor Hale's empire for 3 years, he remarked, pouring himself coffee. This will be monumental. It will be merciless, Jessica corrected, her eyes remaining on her work. A semantic distinction? Dante emerged from his room at 9:30, impeccably dressed, save for his jacket. His gaze located Arya, still clad in her pajamas, her hands trembling around her coffee cup. He gently guided her towards her own room. It is time, he said quietly, and proceed at your own pace. The event will not commence without you. The bathroom was a sterile sanctuary of marble and glass. Arya stood under a torrent of hot water, attempting to impose some structure on the chaos in her mind. Tonight, she would confront Victor. She would confront Lena. She would stand before 400 individuals and dismantle 5 years of falsehoods, layer by layer. Her hands were still unsteady as she emerged. The dress was on the door, a swath of midnight blue, flawless and expectant. Arya observed it for a long, silent moment before she could bring herself to wear it. The silk felt cool against her warm skin, clinging to her like a second skin, like armor. An hour was lost to hair and cosmetics. She opted for simplicity. Gentle waves in her hair, a natural complexion save for the lipstick, a rich, defiant crimson. The woman in the reflection was more mature than the one from 6 weeks ago, her features more defined, her eyes possessing a new, unshakable conviction of her own value. When she re-entered the living room, Dante was there. He looked up, and for an instant he simply paused. "What?" she asked, her voice strained. "Nothing. You appear—" He paused, searching for the right adjective, and then he spoke it. "Ready." From behind her barricade of documents, Jessica glanced up. "All right. We require photographs." "Photographs?" "For the preliminary phase," Jessica retorted. "Dante Moretti and his enigmatic new fiancé. We released them 30 minutes prior to our arrival. Let the rumor mill begin its work." She gestured to David, who produced a camera. "Just a few. Appear at ease." A state of ease felt entirely unattainable. Arya was a column of pure anxiety. Dante's hand at her waist was a warm anchor against the silk, a reminder of a reality that was, she had to recall, merely part of the performance. He drew closer, his fragrance like a distant storm. "Breathe," he murmured for her ears alone. "You are not on a final walk. The conflict has already been decided. Then why does it feel as if I might be ill?" "Because you are not an automaton," he whispered in reply. The camera's shutter clicked perhaps 50 times, each flash a spark in a calculated incendiary plot. Jessica analyzed the images with a surgeon's precision, selecting 3 and dispatching them to a contact represented only by a string of digits. "The sequence is initiated," she announced. "They detonate online at 6:30. By the time of your arrival, your identity will have already conquered the room." A profound dread seized Arya. "Everyone?" "Everyone who constitutes a threat or an asset. That room is a collection of minds addicted to the glow of their screens. They will see the photographs, they will see you with Dante, and they will connect the narrative." Jessica's expression was that of a predator, ensuring the kill. "Victor will feel your shadow long before his eyes find you." "Good." A voice of pure steel emerged from Arya, surprising even herself. The remainder of the afternoon became a study in temporal distortion, each minute an agonizing hour. Arya attempted to read, but the text dissolved into an indecipherable blur. The television offered no solace, its noise an assault on her senses. At his desk, Dante was a contained force of nature, his Italian a low, lethal frequency that pulsed with strategic secrets and absolute power. At 4, Marco departed. At 5, Jessica and David dismantled their command center. "I will see you on the field of battle," Jessica stated. "And remember, you are to be an apparition until I give the signal. Your sole function is to smile, project an aura of untouchability, and let their imaginations do the work." "What if he isolates me before then?" "In that event, Dante justifies his retainer," she replied with a knowing smile. "Or its equivalent. You comprehend." When they were gone, the silence occupying the cavernous apartment was absolute and overwhelming. Positioned at the window, Arya stood as a silent sentinel, observing the day's slow bleed into night as the city's grid of lights flickered to life. "You require sustenance," Dante's voice fractured the quiet. "I cannot." "Then water. To collapse mid-conquest would be a tactical failure." She turned to face him. He held a glass out to her. She accepted it. The cold liquid a shock to her system and confronted the reality of her own dehydration. "Thank you," she whispered. "For the water? For the entire architecture of this." He measured her with his gaze, his eyes searching hers for a long moment. "You will be victorious tonight, Arya. You maintain that assertion because it is an objective truth." He glanced at his timepiece. "The vehicle arrives in 30 minutes. Are you prepared?" No, her entire being screamed, yet she forced the affirmative yes. At 6:30, precisely as the architect of the evening had designed, the photographs became public domain. Arya's phone erupted in a digital cataclysm, a tidal wave of messages and calls so overwhelming she simply powered it down. "Let them speculate," Dante had counseled. "We will manage the fallout tomorrow." Their vehicle, a discreet black Mercedes, not some ostentatious limousine, arrived at 6:45, its driver impassive. Arya sank into the leather upholstery, the silk of her gown a cool caress. Dante occupied the space beside her. The Grandview Hotel was a 20-minute transit. She watched the city become an impressionistic blur. Familiar facades, a world entirely unchanged while she had undergone a fundamental metamorphosis. Her mind drifted to the last time she attended this gala, 2 years prior. Victor had introduced her to 3 individuals, then marooned her in the periphery while he commanded the room's attention. "What occupies your thoughts?" Dante's voice was a low vibration. "That I should have incinerated his world 2 years ago. You lacked the necessary tools for that campaign 2 years ago. How could you possibly ascertain that? Because you are only marginally equipped for it now." Noticing her expression, he amended his statement. "That is not a critique. The action you are about to undertake, to march back into Victor's dominion and publicly deconstruct it, demands a very particular form of strength, the kind forged in the crucible of utter devastation. I am not broken. No, but you were, and you have since rebuilt yourself into a variable Victor cannot possibly calculate. That is our strategic advantage. My apologies." The Grandview Hotel materialized ahead. 50 stories of glass and steel, a monolithic gesture of defiance against the night sky. A procession of vehicles coiled toward valets and security personnel consulting their lists. Arya observed women in couture gowns and men in $1,000 tuxedos pouring into the entrance. 2 years ago, she had felt like an absolute imposter among them. Tonight, she felt as if she possessed the deed to the very structure. Their car advanced to the front. The valet opened Dante's door. He exited, adjusted his jacket, and extended a hand to Arya. She accepted it. The world detonated in a blinding onslaught of camera flashes before she had even fully emerged. Arya's body tensed. The paparazzi were an unplanned contingency, but Dante's grip on her hand tightened, a solid point of anchorage. "Smile," he whispered. "Give them a narrative to dissect." And so she did. She smiled as if she owned the night itself, as if this chaos were a deliberate part of her master design, and not as if she were a barely contained device of terror and retribution. They navigated a corridor of blinding light. The lobby was another level of spectacle. More cameras, more spectators, every head in the vast space swiveling in their direction. The whispers ignited instantly. "Is that Dante Moretti? Who is the woman accompanying him? I saw the images. That is his fiancée. Moretti has a fiancée? She seems familiar. Is she of any consequence?" Dante moved with purpose, a hand at the small of Arya's back, carving a path through the throng, like a man who had never questioned his own dominion over any space he entered. Security waved them past the checkpoint without a word. It was a given. Dante Moretti does not wait in lines. The ballroom was on the 3rd floor, a cavernous hall with cathedral-like ceilings and chandeliers capable of crushing a vehicle. It was already a swarm of faces Arya recognized from financial journals and society columns. Old money, new money, and the kind of dangerous capital that remains unspoken in polite company. This was Victor's kingdom, except tonight he was no longer its sole monarch. There, Dante murmured, inclining his head across the expanse. Arya's gaze locked onto Victor by the bar, holding court among his circle of sycophants. He was smirking at some remark, a champagne flute in hand, entirely at ease. He had no awareness of the shifting tectonic plates beneath him. "Where is Lena?" Arya asked. 3 o'clock, blue gown." Arya looked. Lena Cross was at the silent auction, her dress aspiring to a level of sophistication it failed to achieve. She was young, painfully so. She possessed the wide-eyed optimism of one who still perceived the world as a ladder, and not as a pit of vipers. For a brief half-second, Arya experienced a genuine pang of pity for the girl. It lasted no longer than that. Mr. Moretti. A man in his 60s approached, extending a hand. "I am surprised to see you in attendance." "Richard." Dante shook it. It was a decision made on impulse. "Allow me to introduce my fiancée, Arya Stone." Richard's entire demeanor shifted. Stone. As in Arya Stone?" Dante interjected smoothly. "I find she requires no further qualifier." It was a masterful strategic maneuver, branding Arya not as Victor's discarded wife, but as an entity of her own making. Richard understood. "A true pleasure," he said, his lips barely brushing Arya's hand. "Your strategic intellect is the stuff of legend." "Is it?" Arya's tone was perfectly neutral. "Oh, unequivocally. The Castellano merger was a masterpiece of corporate strategy. You single-handedly salvaged that corporation from oblivion." Arya felt a cold weight solidify in her stomach. "Thank you." Richard moved away. 2 more individuals immediately filled the void. A couple who owned a luxury hotel chain, followed by a venture capitalist, then a hedge fund manager. Each time, Dante's introduction was precisely the same. "My fiancée, Arya Stone." And each time, the response was a perfect replication. Shock, intrigue, and the slow, dawning comprehension that she was far more than just a decorative presence on Dante's arm. They were recalling her work. The cognitive gears were turning. Across the ballroom, Victor continued his performance, utterly oblivious. "He still has not registered your presence." Marco materialized beside Arya, a champagne flute in hand. "This suspense is agonizing. When does he finally see her?" "Patience," Dante instructed. "Patience is tedious. Patience is a weapon." A server passed with champagne. Arya procured a glass, not for the drink, but to occupy her trembling hands. More people converged on them, more introductions, more moments of realization flickering across faces as they processed her name. Arya observed the intelligence disseminate through the room like a contagion. A head would incline for a whisper, a phone would emerge for a covert search. By 7:15, half the attendees understood that Dante Moretti had arrived with Victor Hale's estranged wife. At 7:20, a woman Arya did not recognize approached with the focused intensity of a predator. "Arya Stone," she purred, her voice a viscous layer of feigned sweetness. "I heard you had returned. What a surprise." "Is it?" Arya countered. "Well, after your unseemly separation from Victor, the collective assumption was that you'd retreated to some quiet corner to vanish." The woman's smile acquired a razor's edge. "But to re-emerge with Dante Moretti, how very Compelling. Dante's hand settled on Arya's waist. Compelling is one interpretation. The woman's laugh was a brittle thing, like the sound of shattering glass. Victor must be positively unraveling. Must he? Arya's expression was a perfect, unreadable mask. Oh, without question. I mean, losing you was a blow, but to lose you to... She paused, her eyes flicking toward Dante. Well, this is a formidable plot twist. If you'll excuse us, Dante intervened with practiced civility. I must speak with a colleague. He guided Arya away before the woman could protest. A complete vulture, he murmured. But her analysis is correct. Victor is nearing his breaking point. Excellent. That is the objective. At 7:25, the room was plunged into darkness. An announcement directed guests to their tables. The entire assembly began to migrate. Arya and Dante were seated at table 3, a prime tactical position with an unobstructed view of the impending fallout. Marco was there, along with 2 investors and some tech executives she'd met once. Ms. Stone, the chief executive officer said as she took her seat. An unexpected pleasure, the CEO remarks. It was entirely spontaneous, Arya replies, echoing Dante's fabricated reason, and with a notable companion. The CEO's gaze assesses Dante. My congratulations on the engagement. Thank you, Dante returns, his tone devoid of warmth. Arya could almost hear the CEO's internal monologue, calculating the timeline of this new union. At 7:28, Victor assumes the stage, a portrait of manufactured confidence. For Arya, the air thins. His appearance is his primary asset, a tailored suit, flawless hair, and a conqueror's smile as he approaches the microphone. Good evening, he begins, his voice an exercise in pure hubris, the sound of a man assured of victory. This was a banner year for Hale Enterprises, Victor proclaims. Our European expansion exceeded projections by 40%. The alliance with Castellan Industries created unforeseen opportunities, and our future plans are grander still. Arya's hands clench, her own labors being recast as his triumph. My thanks to an extraordinary team, Victor adds, gesturing to his loyalists. Their dedication made this possible. From the front row, Lena watches him, completely captivated by the performance. A sudden impulse to hurl her glass rises in Arya. Dante's hand covers hers beneath the table. Breathe! She follows his instruction. Inhale, exhale. Victor continues to spin his narrative of corporate conquest. The audience consumes it uncritically, their applause and nods affirmations of his myth. At 7:43, Jessica Chen appears beside Arya. 2 minutes. Are you prepared? A silent nod is Arya's only reply. Jessica dissolves back into the crowd, positioning herself near the stage, her phone primed. On stage, Victor prepares his grand finale. As we look ahead, I am profoundly excited to announce. At that moment, every screen in the hall flashes to life. The large displays flanking the stage, every monitor, and the myriad glowing phones held by the guests all illuminate with a single damning message. The title is an indictment: The True Architect, Intellectual Property Claims Against Hale Enterprises. Murmurs begin, coalescing into a wave of disbelief. Victor freezes, his pronouncement dying on his lips as his eyes fix on the screens. His confident veneer shatters into confusion, his complexion paling in 3 seconds. What? He manages. Then a different voice, calm and incisive, cuts through the growing disorder. Good evening. My name is Jessica Chen, and I serve as counsel for Ms. Arya Stone in her litigation against Hale Enterprises and Victor Hale. The room erupts into a storm of whispered speculation. Victor's gaze frantically scans the audience, finally landing on hers. The precise moment of comprehension is visible, the cold reality of her strategic war. Tonight, Jessica's voice continues. We will demonstrate that the most significant successes of Hale Enterprises originated not with Mr. Hale, but with Miss Stone during their marriage, work for which she was never compensated, credited, or acknowledged. The displays shift, showing contracts bearing Arya's signature, seeding her own intellectual creations. Financial ledgers appear, revealing cash flows to fabricated consultants, funds covertly paid to Arya via shell corporations Victor had established. That is not, Victor reaches for the microphone. This is a fabrication. The Castellan merger. Jessica's voice overrides his denial. Proposed by Miss Stone in March of 2021. Documents show she led all crucial negotiations. She architected the agreement. She navigated the legal complexities. Mr. Hale merely affixed his signature. The screens now present a deluge of proof. Arya's own notes, her strategic proposals, her detailed risk analyses. The whispers intensify into open conversation. Phones are raised across the room, recording the evidence broadcast from the screens. The European expansion, Jessica continues her assault, was also conceived by Miss Stone. She possesses the market analyses, the partnership agreements, the original business plan, all authored by her, dated well before Mr. Hale ever presented it. Victor's face shifts from pale to a deep, furious crimson. This is an invasion of privacy. Someone disable those screens. No one moves to assist him. The offshore investment strategy, the tech market entry, the debt restructuring that saved this company in 2022. Jessica's voice is a wrecking ball. All Ms. Stone's work, all uncompensated, all appropriated. Arya sits with regal composure, her drink untouched, witnessing Victor's public demolition. Arya! He finally identifies her, his trembling finger pointing. This is your doing. You actually believe you can... I believe I can reclaim what is mine, Arya states, rising. Her voice cuts through the ensuing silence. I believe your era of profiting from my intellect is concluded, and I believe everyone here should know the true founder of Hale Enterprises. A profound quiet descends. Victor can only stare, utterly undone. You're delusional. You're... Lena, tell them. Tell them these are falsehoods. Every gaze in the room pivots to Lena, whose face is now ashen. Lena falters, her voice barely audible. Tell them, Victor commands. I have no knowledge of any of this, Lena whispers, nearly inaudibly. Naturally, you don't, Arya retorts. You are 24. You have been employed here 8 months. You cannot fathom what this company's construction required because you were not present. She then addresses the entire assembly. But I was. For every late night, every crisis, every impossible challenge, I was the one performing the labor while Victor took the credit. That is an absolute fabrication, Victor declares, but his words carry no weight. Then account for the contracts, Jessica challenges. Account for the emails. Account for why Ms. Stone's name is on every key strategy document for the last 5 years. Victor's mouth hangs agape. He has no retort. Marco is beaming, as if he has just won a grand prize. Dante reclines, observing the unfolding catastrophe, as if it were premium entertainment. Ms. Stone is filing for divorce, Jessica declares, and she is suing for the return of her intellectual property and compensation from Hale Enterprises. We appraise her stolen contributions at a value of approximately $200 million. A collective gasp sweeps the ballroom. 200 million? That is preposterous, Victor finally says. You will never. We have documentation for every last cent, Jessica states, including the fraudulent companies you used to conceal payments, including the NDAs you coerced her into signings, including the contracts you pressured her to accept, relinquishing her work for no compensation. The screens shift once more, displaying financial records, evidence of the sham corporations, the concealed funds, the proof for every one of Jessica's claims. Victor, a man named Richard, rises from a front table. Is there any substance to this? Aye, Victor begins. She is misrepresenting things. Did you, or did you not, have your wife sign over the rights to her intellectual property? Richard's tone is sharp. Victor's hesitation speaks volumes. Answer the question, another investor demands. It was, he stammers. We were married. It is community property. All of it. Marital assets you concealed from your own board, Jessica interjects. Marital assets you presented as your own singular genius in official filings. Marital assets you leveraged to secure investments under deceptive pretenses. More shocked exclamations, more frantic whispers. Arya simply watches as the venom of doubt and anger spreads, the slow dawning realization that they were all manipulated. These are individuals who operate on principles of business and trust. Victor just shattered both. I demand a complete audit, someone shouts. I second that motion, another adds. This is a witch hunt, Victor cries in desperation. This is merely a vindictive woman with a grievance. This is a woman with evidence, Jessica counters. Evidence we intend to file with the court on Monday morning, and we are submitting this evidence to the SEC as well. Proof that Mr. Hale has been engaged in outright fraud. That word detonates within the room. Fraud. Victor's expression simply collapses. For a brief moment, Arya sees the man she married, frightened and small. Then his features contort with pure malice. You will pay for this, he hisses, his glare fixed on her. I will make you regret this. Is that a threat, Mr. Hale? Dante rises with deliberate calm, because I imagine this audience would be interested to hear you threaten your former wife publicly. It is then that Victor seems to truly see Dante, his eyes widen. You, he breathes, you're with him. This is about me reclaiming what you stole. Arya interrupts. Dante is simply the man who treats me as a partner, not as a shameful secret. The room falls utterly silent. 400 people are witnessing the public dissolution of a marriage. I loved you, Victor says, his voice breaking. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing. I did not first earn myself before you discarded me for a newer version. Arya's voice is like steel. Do not speak to me of love, Victor. You do not understand its meaning. Victor appears as though struck. His mouth opens, but no words emerge. Around them, phones are held aloft, streaming his complete and utter humiliation to thousands. "This is not permissible," he uttered at last, his protest a mere whisper of its former power. An agreement existed. A vow. "Existed," Arya echoed, her tone dissecting the word. "A term rendered void the moment your gaze settled upon Lena." In the audience, Lena emitted a fractured sound, a hybrid of shock and sorrow, her meticulously applied mask dissolving in tears. Here was the familiar pang of pity for the pawn, even as the king was being toppled. "Ms. Cross," Jessica's voice interjected, a scalpel in the thickening tension. "Your file indicates you are Mr. Hale's executive assistant. Are you able to affirm a personal relationship with him these past 7 months?" Lena's complexion flared. "That is a private matter." "Privacy is not a shield in a case of fraud and marital dissolution," Jessica stated, her voice devoid of warmth. "Therefore, were you engaged in a romantic entanglement with Mr. Hale during his marriage?" "Do not answer that question," Victor commanded with a bark. "Lena, you will remain silent." "Yes." Lena's voice was a thread of sound. "Yes, we are." Her eyes pleaded with Victor. "Inform them. Convince them of our reality." "Lena, close your mouth." Victor's tone was an instrument of brutality, its veneer of charm stripped away. Arya observed as hope extinguished in the young woman's eyes, the devastating calculus finally becoming clear. Victor's affection was not for her, but for her youth, her obsession, and her profound naivety. "You promised me." Lena's voice shattered. "You professed your love. You stated that once the divorce was—" "After the divorce, nothing will remain." Victor's voice escalated into a scream. "Do you not comprehend her strategy? She is incinerating everything." The atmosphere in the room shifted from stunned silence to rapt attention. This was a spectacle far surpassing scripted drama. This was ruin in real time. Richard rose once more. "Victor, you must relinquish the microphone." "The board requires a meeting." "The board?" Victor's laugh was manic and high. "The board is impotent. Half of its members are nothing without my influence." "You mean without your wife's—" "His ex-wife, it seems." A voice as sharp as splintering ice interjected. It belonged to a woman in her 50s, her hair the color of steel, her gaze a weapon. Arya offered a quiet correction. "Almost." "Catherine." The name seemed to hang in the air as the woman fixed her stare on Arya. "Miss Stone," she said, each syllable a heavy stone dropping into the silent pool of the room. "Was the account from Ms. Chen accurate? The strategic initiatives for which Mr. Hale claimed credit, were they, in fact, yours?" Arya rose, the room tilting for a moment before righting itself. "They were." Then followed the chronicle of her ghost work, the Castellan acquisition, the European expansion, the debt restructuring, the clandestine offshore accounts, the pivot to technology. Her voice remained unwavering. "I possess the emails, the documents, recordings of every meeting. I archived everything." Catherine's nod was deliberate, like a magistrate delivering a verdict. "If this is substantiated, we are facing a problem of immense magnitude." Victor began to frantically backpedal. "There is no problem. This is a contentious separation, a dispute over shared assets. It is entirely legal." But Jessica's voice cut through his rising panic. "Fraud is never legal," she countered. "And misrepresenting authorship to secure capital. That is the textbook definition. The SEC will devour this scenario. A tremor of unrest passed through the room. 3 board members rose, then 5, until the entire table stood in silent judgment. "We must convene an emergency session," Richard declared, "this evening. Before the situation deteriorates further." A cheerful voice, utterly dissonant, came from Marco. "Oh, it has already grown far beyond this room." He brandished his phone. "We are currently trending on 3 separate platforms." The phrases illuminated the screen. A digital execution, #Hail Enterprises Scandal, #fraud at the top. And Marco added with a smirk, "My own contribution, #Arya Stone's Revenge." Victor's glare, homicidal in its intensity, locked onto Marco. "This was your doing, the 2 of you." Marco merely took a sip of his champagne. "I am but a spectator, appreciating a masterwork as it unfolds." A sly smile touched his lips. "Although I may have suggested to the press that tonight's events would be incendiary. I trust that's acceptable." Victor's voice fractured. "The press? You summoned them to this location?" Marco's grin broadened. "It wasn't necessary. They detected the scent of blood in the digital waters. It seems the fall of a king is a universally beloved spectacle." Victor's eyes darted about like a cornered beast, finally settling on Dante. "You," he spat. "This was your design, to ruin me, to usurp my empire." Dante's response was a point of absolute calm in the swirling chaos. "I have no desire for your corporation. It is a foundering vessel, submerged in liabilities. My interest lies in talent." His gaze shifted to Arya. "And fortunately for me, I have located it." Victor was descending into incoherence. "She is manipulating you. Can you not perceive that this is merely an elaborate act of vengeance against me?" "No," Dante corrected him. "She's employing her own extraordinary skills to reclaim what was stolen. I am merely endorsing her strategy. There is a significant distinction." Victor began to protest, but a new figure silenced him. "Mr. Hale." A man in a severe suit materialized on stage, his presence casting an immediate chill. "Agent Morrison, Securities and Exchange Commission. I will require you to accompany me." The entire ballroom fell into a profound silence. "What?" Victor could only stare. "At this moment, but there are no charges." The agent's voice was perfectly level. "This is not a formal arrest, not presently. However, Ms. Chen's testimony has raised inquiries that demand immediate clarification." Agent Morrison's expression was inscrutable. "You have the option to cooperate now, or we can escalate this to an official matter." Victor's gaze traveled from Lena to his board, and finally to Arya. He was ashen, perspiring despite the room's cool temperature. He met Arya's eyes, issuing one last futile threat. "This is not concluded," but Agent Morrison intervened. "Mr. Hale, let us depart." And with that, they materialized, federal agents, not security, flanking him, escorting the fallen monarch from his own stage. His shouts receded as the door swung shut. Lena, unsteady on her feet, made a move to pursue him. "Victor, wait," she called out. "I am coming with you." He offered no backward glance. She was left standing alone in the vast ballroom, the focus of 400 pairs of eyes as her world publicly disintegrated. In that moment, the full weight of her losses, both real and imagined, crashed down upon her. A wrenching sob escaped her, and she fled toward the restrooms. Arya observed it all, searching within herself for a sense of triumph, or even pity, for any emotion at all. But there was only a void, an empty space where a feeling was meant to be. Then the silence shattered into a cacophony of voices and illuminated phone screens as the board of directors devolved into a frantic circle. Jessica materialized by her side. "It is time to depart," she murmured. "The media is en route." Marco gestured toward the main entrance, a chaotic scene of flashing cameras and security personnel. "The media has already arrived. The service exit, then? This way." A firm hand on her back was Dante, steering her through the throng of onlookers. They were quickly engulfed by investors, board members, and opportunists sensing a power vacuum. Dante navigated the turmoil with practiced ease, calm and implacable. They located a service corridor, descended 2 flights of stairs into the building's depths, and emerged into a darkened alley where a vehicle waited, a silent promise of escape. "How did you manage?" Arya began, unable to formulate the complete question. "I anticipate eventualities," Dante stated with simplicity. They entered the car, Marco joining them, while Jessica took the front seat. The vehicle merged with traffic just as the first wave of reporters flooded the alley. A profound silence occupied the initial few blocks of their journey. Arya watched the city lights smear across the window, her mind struggling to catalog the night's events. It was done. It was truly done. Victor was dismantled. His empire was reduced to cinders. His name was now a cautionary tale. She had prevailed. So why did this victory feel so profoundly vacant? Marco was the first to break the silence. "That was pure poetry," he said, his voice full of awe. "Utter poetry." The expression on his face when those slides appeared, I thought he might suffer a cardiac event. And consider this. Jessica reveals that the agent's arrival was her own maneuver. She confesses, "I may have intimated to them that this evening's gala would be worthy of their attention." Arya could only stare, her mind reeling. "You orchestrated this." "I orchestrate for all possibilities. Their decision to appear was their own." A small, sharp smile formed on Jessica's lips. "But I might have implied that a delayed arrival would mean missing the explosive conclusion." Marco was unequivocally impressed. "You are a truly formidable woman." "Why, thank you." The quiet returned, heavy with implication. In her purse, Arya's phone vibrated incessantly on silent mode, a desperate summons she pointedly ignored. "So, what is our destination?" she finally inquired. "Somewhere secure," Dante answered. "A place to fortify yourself before the true storm arrives." "The true storm?" Arya echoed, her voice laced with confusion. "Oh, my dear, that was merely the overture," Jessica clarified. "Tomorrow the main performance begins. We are talking about litigation, federal investigations, sworn depositions. It is about to become unpleasant." "What level of unpleasant?" "The highest level. Victor will deploy his entire financial arsenal against us. His legal team will protract this indefinitely. The board will fracture, and investors will flee. The entire corporate structure could collapse before this reaches a courtroom." A chasm of dread opened in Arya's stomach. "The company could actually fail?" "It is a distinct possibility, perhaps even a probability." Jessica swiveled in her seat to face Arya directly. "Will that present a problem for you?" "I am not sure." Arya envisioned the rank-and-file employees, The assistants, the analysts, the many people untainted by Victor's corruption. All of those blameless individuals will be left without employment, she whispered. That vessel was already taking on water, Marco countered sharply. The corporation has been losing capital for 6 consecutive months. Victor was merely using falsified reports to patch the holes. You only hastened the inevitable. Yes, but... There are no buts. Dante's voice cut in, soft yet absolute. One cannot rescue a drowning person while being pulled under oneself. Victor constructed a monument of deceit. You simply toppled it before it collapsed and buried you along with everyone else. The car slowed to a stop before an unmarked building. Dante exited and extended a hand to her. She accepted it, allowing him to lead. It was clearly an exclusive establishment, anonymous save for a guard at the entrance who offered Dante a deferential nod. The setting was a sanctum of influence, all dark wood and aged leather, a space for hushed conspiracies and the chime of ice in costly tumblers. Dante escorted them to a secluded room, where a table was laid with bread, fruit, and cheese, an unspoken acknowledgement that their campaign required sustenance. Arya sank into a seat, her gaze vacant before the food, the very idea of nourishment, a cruel irony. You should drink this, Dante offered, placing a glass of amber spirit in her hand. Adrenaline is a fleeting fuel. I'm all right. No, you're not. Drink. She obeyed. The whiskey was a premium vintage, a searing line of heat that pierced the numbness in her core, leaving a welcome warmth in its wake. Marco collapsed into a chair nearby. I can't process that it actually happened. I anticipated it, but witnessing it... Jessica's voice, sharp as fractured glass, cut him short. Nothing has been achieved just yet. Tonight was merely the spectacular prologue. The difficult act is only now beginning. Arya's voice, when she finally found it, was frail. That wasn't the difficult act. That, Jessica countered, her focus already consumed by her tablet, was pure spectacle, essential, deeply gratifying, but it was just the opening gambit. Legal documents scrolled across her screen. By Monday, we move this war into the courtroom. Victor's legal wolves will mount a full-scale assault. Expect countersuits, motions to dismiss, accusations of broken confidentiality. Their entire strategy will be to frame you as an unstable ex-spouse, fabricating tales for revenge. But we have evidence. Evidence they will twist. Evidence they will label deceptive. Evidence they will claim was a mutual creation, or that is shielded by marital privilege. Jessica glanced up from her screen for a brief moment. No, I possess zero doubt that we will ultimately prevail, Jessica affirmed. But this is destined to be a protracted, grueling conflict. We are looking at months, possibly years, and it will be savage. The true cost of her retribution settled upon Arya, a heavy, asphyxiating burden. She had fixated on this single night, on shattering Victor's existence, but had never considered the dawn that would follow. I cannot, she began, the words catching in her throat. I cannot endure this for years. You won't have to, Dante's voice emerged from across the room. Not by yourself? She met his gaze. He was simply observing her, leaning against a wall, his stare potent and unwavering. What is that supposed to mean? She asked. It means you're no longer a victim. You possess resources, you possess security, you have a war cabinet in this very room. He indicated Marco and Jessica. The woman who fled Victor's mansion 6 weeks ago is gone. You have been remade. What had she been remade into? A menace? The term materialized in the space between them. Arya considered it, testing its substance in her mind. A menace. Was that her new identity? The tension was broken by the buzz of Marco's phone. A short laugh escaped him. "Oh, you all need to see this. Victor is with federal agents. An informant tipped them off. They're already sharing photos." He presented his screen, revealing a pixelated image of Victor in the back of a government vehicle, his face a perfect mask of rage, or perhaps undiluted panic. Arya braced for a reaction, any reaction. Elation, vindication, relief. But within her soul there was only a profound silence. "I'm stepping outside," she announced, rising suddenly. "I require some air." "Arya," Dante began, "I'm fine. Just grant me a moment." She was through the door before anyone could intervene. The establishment featured a small, concealed terrace that overlooked a garden of such manicured perfection it seemed artificial. Resting against the balustrade, Arya struggled to draw a breath. She had succeeded. Victor was ruined. She had reclaimed her work, her reputation, her very existence. So why did it feel as though she had just forfeited everything of value? The door opened behind her. She did not turn. "Dante, I wish to be alone." "That's not an option. My agreement stipulates that I prevent you from any reckless actions." His tone was light, but as he moved to stand beside her, his eyes held genuine concern. "What is transpiring in that mind of yours?" "Nothing, and simultaneously everything." Arya continued to gaze at the garden. "I expected to feel different." "Different in what way?" "Superior, justified, truly anything other than this." She finally pivoted to meet his eyes. "I just publicly annihilated my husband before an audience of 400 individuals. I incinerated his corporation, his public standing, every single thing he had constructed. I should be experiencing a state of absolute euphoria right now." "But you are not." "He was deserving of every last part of it." "That is not what I inquired about." Arya fell silent for a beat. "I feel hollow, as if I torched my own home merely to eliminate a single spider." "Did you love him?" Dante asked, his question piercingly direct. "Genuinely?" "I believed I did. 5 years ago, when we were married, I was convinced." She cut herself off. "What I was convinced of then is no longer relevant." "It is relevant if it continues to consume you from within." Arya turned back toward the garden. "I loved the man I perceived him to be, the one who spoke of partnership, of creating a world together, the one who truly acknowledged me." A bitter laugh broke from her lips. "It appears that man was an elaborate fiction. I was merely a convenience, a resource to be depleted and then discarded for a more recent model. Lena is not an improvement. She is younger, more submissive, not a competitor." Arya's knuckles whitened as she clutched the railing. "She will not challenge his authority or question his supposed brilliance, nor will she be a living monument to the fact that he is not the wunderkind he purports to be." "Badis, for whatever it is worth," Dante said softly, "you are worth 100 of her." "That hardly matters when my own husband is the one who holds the opposing view." They stood in silence, the city's hum a constant drone around them, the sounds of vehicles and humanity, the rhythm of a world indifferent to the collapse of hers. "I have killed people," Dante stated, the words coming from nowhere. Arya's head whipped toward him. What? A long time passed while establishing my enterprise. I eliminated those who obstructed my path, directly, with my own 2 hands. His face was a mask, impossible to decipher. Do you want to know the feeling that followed? No. Emptiness, the very same sensation you are experiencing now, because retribution does not fill the chasm that betrayal carves into your spirit. It only sharpens your awareness of the void. Arya could only stare at him, utterly floored. Why are you sharing this with me? Because you must understand that your emotional state is normal. You invested 5 years of your life building a future with a man who cast you aside. Destroying his life does not mend your heart. It only ensures he cannot break it a second time. My heart is not broken, Arya said, the denial a reflex. Are you certain of that? Her mouth opened to form a rebuttal, but then it closed. Was it? The rage had been her propellant for so long. The singular mission to reclaim her due had been so all-consuming that she had never paused to inspect what lay buried beneath the resulting devastation. I no longer know, she finally confessed. I have no comprehension of what I am feeling. Dante gave a slow nod. At least you are being truthful. So this is the part where you offer some sagacious counsel? Assure me that it all improves? No. This is the part where I tell you it becomes different. The suffering transforms, the anger recedes, and then one day, you will notice that an entire day has passed without a single thought of the person who wronged you. He paused, but that will require time. For tonight, you have permission to feel like a complete and utter disaster. In spite of it all, Arya said, you are dreadful at motivational speeches. I consistently inform people of that, yet no one seems to listen. The door creaked open once more, and Marco's head appeared. Apologies for the intrusion, but Jessica says we must place some calls for Monday. Oh, and the paparazzi are aware of our location. We have approximately 20 minutes before this location is overrun. Dante swore under his breath. How? The hotel valet recognized your vehicle, checked the registration. You understand the routine. Arya composed herself, her public persona sliding back into place. What decisions must be made? Do we file the lawsuit first thing Monday morning, or do we delay? Do we issue a press statement or maintain our silence? Do you wish to pursue a swift, decisive settlement, or are you prepared to wage this war over the long term? Marco's expression was one of profound empathy. That is a monumental decision. 5 minutes, Dante commanded, and Marco vanished. Arya inhaled once, then again. We file on Monday. I will release a brief, professional statement with 0 extraneous details. And I am pushing for a settlement. I refuse to squander the next 2 years of my life in a courtroom. Are you positive about that? No, but it is what will happen. She turned to him, her gaze direct. Thank you for tonight, for every part of it. We had an agreement. We had a business arrangement. This, she gestured to their surroundings, was significantly more than that. Dante's entire demeanor shifted, morphing into something she could not decipher. We have to leave. Jessica is likely already drafting that statement. He was not mistaken. Upon returning to the room, Jessica's fingers were a tempest across her tablet. This is our narrative, she announced, her eyes fixed on the display. Mrs. Stone is disheartened that a personal matter became public, but she affirms the validity of her claims and will see this resolved through the appropriate legal avenues. It is concise, clinical, and offers them nothing to exploit. Arya concurred. Perfect. Release it tonight. Let the situation ferment over the weekend. Then we initiate action Monday morning. Jessica finally raised her eyes. You need to disappear for a few days. Travel somewhere the press cannot reach you. Allow the initial onslaught to pass. I have a location, Dante interjected. Upstate. It is secluded, entirely secure. I cannot simply flee. You can, and you must, Jessica retorted. Trust me, this metropolis is the absolute last place on this earth you should be for the next 72 hours. It is going to be a 3-ring circus. Marco's phone began to vibrate relentlessly on the table. He glanced at the screen and grimaced. She is correct. The internet is having a complete meltdown. You are a global trend. Someone has already created a meme. A meme? Indeed. The expression on Victor's face when the display's activated. It is, well, you should probably avoid seeing it. A bizarre, tense laugh escaped Arya's lips. It felt inappropriate, but the release of pressure was desperately needed. Fine, she acquiesced. All right, I will go upstate. I will become a phantom, but only for a short time. That is all the time we require, Jessica assured her. After that, it will be imperative for you to be seen again. Project an image of transparency. The ensuing hour was a maelstrom of calculated maneuvers. Jessica refined the official narrative, disseminating it to 3 prominent news syndicates and resurrecting Arya's dormant social media to post it. Marco managed the influx of journalistic inquiries, dispensing the same hollow, pre-approved script to each caller. Meanwhile, Dante secured the upstate sanctuary, navigating channels Arya preferred to leave unexamined. By the time they departed through a rear entrance to a waiting vehicle, the hour was past midnight. Arya was left in a state of profound psychic depletion, a unique exhaustion born from emotional warfare. The journey to Dante's apartment was shrouded in a heavy silence. Marco remained behind, and Jessica had been deposited at her law offices. She claimed there was work to be done, that sleep was a luxury for those not compensated by the hour. Inside the residence, Arya shed her heels and collapsed onto the couch. The garment that had served as her armor now constricted her like a prison. She felt a desperate need for liberation from the dress, from the night, from her very skin. I need to change, she articulated softly. Take all the time you require. In the bedroom, Arya's fingers faltered on the zipper. She had maintained her composure through the execution of her plan, the ensuing chaos, and the entire fallout. Now, in solitude, she felt as if she might finally fracture. Donning pajamas and scrubbing her face bare, she found herself unable to confront her own reflection. Upon her return, Dante had also transformed, his suit replaced by denim and a t-shirt that lent him a younger, less formidable appearance. He had poured 2 glasses of wine and was gazing out at the urban expanse. Sleep is eluding you, she inquired. It is. And you? An overabundance of adrenaline. He offered her a glass. They stood in stillness, observing the city that had just witnessed her systematic dismantling of Victor's empire. Do you harbor any regrets? Dante finally asked. Regarding what? Any of it. The gala, the public exposure, the manner in which you brought him down. Arya considered the question deeply. No, he earned that. He earned a fate far worse. Yet I lament that it was ever necessary. I wish he had been the man I believed I was marrying. I wish the past 5 years of my existence had not been predicated on a lie. She sampled the wine. I wish I had understood sooner. Had you known, you would not be the woman you are at this moment. Is that meant to be a source of comfort? It is meant to be the truth. Silence settled between them again. Arya felt an immense fatigue deep in her bones, yet it was entwined with a strange, vibrant energy, as if her system was caught between collapse and flight. What follows from here? She posed. Now you begin the process of healing. You reconstruct. You become the person you choose to be, not the one sculpted by another. That sounds idyllic in principle. It is far more arduous in practice, Dante conceded, but you will navigate it. You have a talent for accomplishing the impossible. Arya finished her glass, placed it on the counter, and faced him. Why are you truly assisting me? She pressed. The genuine reason, beyond the business arrangement, beyond our partnership, why? Dante remained quiet for a long, weighty moment. He was seeing a specter from his own history. A decade prior, he had stood on an identical precipice, shattered by betrayal, armed with enough fury to incinerate the world and the cold precision to do so effectively. He was forced to walk through that inferno alone. He is ensuring she will not. Is that the entirety of it? It is. The explanation felt insufficient to her. She could perceive a truth he kept veiled in his gaze, but lacked the energy to extract it. My gratitude, she reiterated. Do not thank me. We are partners. Allies do not receive thanks for executing what is necessary. Is that what this represents? Your duty? His composure fissured. No, but I am not yet able to assign a name to its true nature. His directness was disarming. Arya studied his face, the rigid contours, the shadowed eyes, and the iron control that would occasionally fracture, revealing something authentic beneath. Very well, she eventually exhaled, when you find the words for it. A silent accord formed between them, the city lights shimmering miles below. The future was an intimidating void, yet it resonated with a strange, improbable potential. Then the vibration of her phone shattered the moment, and again, she retrieved it. 53 new messages, 112 notifications, 3 missed calls from anonymous numbers. You ought to silence that, Dante suggested. I'm aware. Yet she scrolled through them. Most were apparitions from a life she had just set ablaze. Former colleagues, estranged friends, individuals who had vanished when she entered Victor's orbit. Now they were all returning, offering disingenuous support, probing for details, or simply seeking proximity to the spectacle. One name caused her to pause. Catherine, the board member who had confronted Victor at the gala. 2 words. Call Monday. What is the matter? Dante inquired. The board wishes to speak with me. In relation to what? I am uncertain, but it must concern the future of the company. Do you still concern yourself with the company's future? Arya genuinely hesitated. Did she? She had co-founded that enterprise, invested 5 years of her essence into it. Yet it was also the gilded cage that had confined her, a monument to Victor's ego, constructed with her own lifeblood. I do not know, she admitted, her voice unvarnished with honesty. Inquire again after I have slept. Understood. She powered off her phone, the device landing on the counter with a quiet finality. I am going to seek whatever rest is possible, she stated. Rouse me if the world ends. The world has already ended, Dante countered. This is merely the aftermath. An authentic laugh escaped Arya, unlike the fractured, hollow sound from before. You are truly dreadful at this. I am aware. She left him standing by the vast window and sought out her bed. The linens felt cool, the mattress a divine comfort. She shut her eyes, willing a state of nothingness. It never arrived. Instead, the evening replayed in a relentless, brutal cycle. Victor's expression as the screens came to life. Lena's devastation, the venomous whispers, and the singular moment she reclaimed her own work. She had been victorious, utterly victorious. So why did this triumph feel so profoundly empty? Arya woke to sunlight slicing through drapes she had neglected to close. A persistent throbbing pulsed in her head, and her mouth was arid with the taste of regret and fine wine. She reached for her phone out of habit, then recalled it was inert. A wise choice. Her former self had been looking out for her. The apartment was utterly still. She moved into the kitchen, discovering a note on the counter in Dante's impeccable script. Attending to some matters. Coffee is made. Keep your phone off. D. The coffee was still warm. Arya poured a cup and carried it to the window. A Sunday morning in the city appeared entirely, deceptively serene. People with their dogs, joggers on the pavement below, couples en route to brunch. As if the world hadn't just observed her obliterate her husband's entire legacy on a live broadcast. One might assume she would be celebrating victory, justice, and all associated sentiments. Instead, she experienced only a soul-deep exhaustion. Her phone rested on the counter like a dormant explosive. She finally yielded and switched it on. A digital deluge immediately ensued. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of alerts. Her inbox was completely inundated. Her social media, inactive for years, erupted with new followers, strangers posting comments, and marriage proposals from men who apparently find a wife's retribution appealing. She was aimlessly scrolling when a single email arrested her attention. The subject line was direct. We must speak. Catherine Reeves, Hale Enterprises Board. Arya opened it. Ms. Stone, you are undoubtedly being inundated, so I will be brief. The board held an emergency session last night. Victor is on indefinite leave pending an SEC investigation. We require a leader immediately, and you're frankly the only individual who truly understands the company's inner workings. Can we meet? Tomorrow, 10 a.m., my office. I believe you will find our offer compelling. Catherine Reeves. Arya read the message once, then twice, then a third time. They actually desired her presence, not as Victor's phantom partner, but as... What? The new chief, the restoration expert, the person tasked with clearing the remnants of his catastrophic legacy? She was staring at the display when Dante returned, carrying bags that smelled of breakfast. He noticed the phone. So, you reconnected to the grid. You do not control me. No, but I am the individual attempting to prevent you from making monumental errors while you are still processing this trauma. He placed the food down. What is the current crisis? Arya simply showed him the screen. Dante read it, his expression a neutral mask. Are you going to go? He asked. I am not sure. Should I? That is not a decision I can make for you. But what does your intuition suggest? Dante considered for a moment. My intuition suggests Catherine Reeves is a cold-blooded genius and utterly without mercy. She did not ascend to that board position through pleasantries. If she is contacting you, it is because she perceives a strategic advantage. For her or for me. For both, most likely. He began to unpack the food. Eggs, bacon, and some ornate-looking pastries. The fundamental question is, do you even desire what she is offering? I have no idea what it entails. Then you must ascertain that. Attend the meeting. Simply listen. You are not obligated to agree to anything. He handed her a fork. But consume this first. Poor choices are often made on an empty stomach. The food was exceptionally good. Arya had not realized the extent of her hunger until the first bite. They ate in the comfortable quiet that exists only with someone you implicitly trust. Jessica made contact while I was out, Dante mentioned after some time. The press statement was effective. The media is largely sympathetic to you. A few outlets are attempting to portray you as a deranged, vengeful ex-spouse, but that was anticipated. And Victor, he is still under intense scrutiny. His legal team is in complete disarray. Marco reports the board is already severing ties, canceling his engagements, and speaking of their profound commitment to integrity. Dante's expression was somber. He is finished, Arya. Even if the SEC declines to press charges, his reputation is irredeemably toxic. Good, Arya retorted. Then, more softly, is it pathological that I derive no satisfaction from this? No. It simply confirms you are not a monster. She had craved this outcome, envisioned his total ruin. Yet the chasm between desiring a thing and navigating its chaotic reality is immense. As Dante refilled her coffee, he articulated the conflict. You were with him for 5 years. A part of you must recall the man you believed him to be. This is not weakness, but the persistence of memory. Arya contemplated this, picturing Victor before the rot of avarice set in. Was the corruption inherent, or was it a byproduct of power? Of her? I have a meeting with Catherine, she stated. All right, you don't see it as a trap? I believe I must hear her proposition. Only then will I know if a trap has been laid. Dante rose, beginning to clear their plates. Besides, to sit in paralysis, dissecting every detail is a path to madness. This is an action. It is forward motion. He spoke of their original plan. We were to go upstate, escape this media frenzy. We can still depart after your meeting. Jessica confirmed Monday morning, correct? See Catherine at 10, sign documents at noon, and we are on the road by 2. He paused, offering an out, unless you wish to abandon the meeting. No, I must understand what she desires. Then that is what we shall discover. The remainder of Sunday was a temporal void, time suspended. Arya's attempts at peace were futile. The words on a page became indecipherable marks. Finally, she opened her laptop, delving into the digital archive of her past. 5 years of her very essence poured into Hale Enterprises. Strategic plans, intricate financial models, detailed market analyses, the architecture of an empire Victor had claimed as his own singular genius. Viewing it now through a lens unclouded by attachment, she saw its brilliance, the sheer scale of what she alone had constructed. It became clear why Victor had kept her in the shadows. Had anyone discovered the puppeteer behind the curtain, they would have questioned why she did not occupy the throne herself. What are you doing? Dante's voice was a quiet presence behind her. I am simply remembering my own value. A faint smile touched his lips. Good. Do not let that fade by tomorrow. That night, Arya slept. It was not a tranquil slumber, but it was profound. She dreamt of boardrooms and contracts, of an avatar of herself who wore power as a bespoke garment, unforgettable, lethal, and honed to a cutting edge. Monday morning arrived with punishing speed. Arya dressed with ritualistic purpose, selecting a charcoal gray suit of severe, clean lines. It projected professionalism. It projected authority. It was attire that signaled she was present for business, not for absolution. Dante drove her to Catherine's chosen rendezvous, a location far from the news vans besieging Hale Enterprises. Catherine had selected a prestigious downtown law firm where she maintained a private office. "Shall I come in with you?" Dante inquired as they arrived. "No, this is a journey I must make alone." "Call if you require extraction." A ghost of a smile touched Arya's lips despite the tremor in her hands. "It is a business meeting, not an abduction." "With Catherine Reeves," he countered, "that distinction can become remarkably thin." The law firm occupied the building's 3 highest levels. Catherine's office, on the 48th floor, offered a commanding vista, much like Dante's. She rose as Arya entered, a tall figure with high cheekbones and silver hair in a stark bob. "Miss Stone, thank you for coming. Ms. Reeves. Catherine, please sit." As Arya settled, Catherine poured coffee from an elegant press, forgoing the formality of asking. "I will not waste your time," Catherine began. "Hale Enterprises is in freefall. Victor has effectively disappeared. The SEC is moving in. We have already lost 3 major investors, and the stock plummeted 40% at the opening bell. I have been monitoring the situation. What you may not be aware of is that the board convened for a 6-hour emergency session last night. We examined every piece of evidence Jessica Chen provided. We consulted our legal counsel, our financial analysts, our crisis management team." Catherine leaned back, her posture one of clinical assessment. "The consensus is that Victor constructed this entire enterprise upon a foundation of falsehoods. Your falsehoods, to be precise, the work he presented as his own." "That is accurate." "This signifies that legally, ethically, and operationally, your claim to lead this company is more substantial than any other." Catherine's gaze was sharp, analytical. "We are prepared to offer you the position of Chief Executive Officer." Arya had anticipated it, had sensed it since the email, yet hearing the words spoken aloud was a seismic event. "Why?" she asked. "Because you are the sole individual on this planet who can salvage this company. You understand the vision, the agreements, the key figures. You were the architect. You can be its redeemer. Alternatively, I could observe it burn to the ground and begin anew." "You could," Catherine conceded. "Dante Moretti would employ you instantly. But is that your true desire, to watch Victor's monumental failure obliterate something you invested 5 years of your life in creating?" The maneuver was brutal, a strategic strike against her pride. Arya recognized the tactic, appealed to her ego, to her sense of authorship, to her need for her vision to outlive the man who nearly destroyed it. "What are the terms?" she inquired. Catherine slid a folder across the expansive desk. "The CEO title, complete executive authority, a commensurate salary. We are discussing 7 figures plus a significant stock option package. You will answer to the board, but frankly, with most of them preoccupied with self-preservation, you will have nearly unrestricted control. Arya opened the folder. The figures were staggering, far beyond mere compensation. This was wealth that could forge a new reality. "And what is your interest in this?" she asked. "A company that does not implode, a CEO who is fundamentally competent, and from a personal standpoint?" Catherine's smile was a thin, predatory line. The profound satisfaction of observing the same men who enabled Victor's deceit now having to report to the very woman they rendered invisible for 5 years. "You did not render me invisible." "No, but I remained silent. I perceived the indicators, noted how the finest concepts emerged from Victor's division, yet were attributed to no one. I failed to ask the difficult questions." Catherine's expression hardened. "Consider this my apology and my attempt at restitution." Arya simply observed the older woman. "So, Catherine Reeves, a formidable player who eschewed games, presented a legitimate proposition." Arya countered, "I require a moment to consider." Catherine's reply was swift. "Of course, but we require a decision by week's end. The company is hemorrhaging capital and credibility. Each day without leadership is an irrecoverable loss." Arya affirmed, "I understand." Catherine leaned forward, her intensity palpable. "Do you? You must grasp that in accepting this, you are entering a war zone. The media will consume you. Victor's loyalists, and they do exist, will orchestrate a campaign to discredit you. A faction of the staff will demand your removal. It will be profoundly unpleasant." Arya stated, "I am prepared for that." Catherine scoffed. "Are you? Because Saturday night was merely a rehearsal." "This will be your new reality. A perpetual ordeal, a constant need to justify your presence, confronting those who will claim you leveraged intimacy for power, or manipulated your husband, or any narrative that allows them to sleep soundly." Catherine's tone was glacial. "I am offering you the throne, Arya, but crowns are heavy, and there will always be hands clawing to seize it." Arya recalled the gala, confronting 400 faces to reclaim her name, and the void that followed, as if revenge were the prelude, not the symphony itself. She then asked, "Permit me a question. If I accept this role, stabilize the company, restore its integrity, Gusho, what becomes of Victor?" "He becomes an absolute public cautionary tale while you triumph with the very creation he attempted to steal from you." A subtle smirk formed on Catherine's lips. "I assumed retribution was your ultimate objective." "It was, but I am now considering a superior alternative." "Such as?" "Such as building something that is unequivocally mine, not salvaging Victor's catastrophe, not rescuing his corporation, mine." Arya closed the folder with quiet finality. "I appreciate the offer, Catherine, truly, but this is not my path." Catherine's eyebrows rose in disbelief. "You are refusing the CEO position at a Fortune 500 company." "I am refusing the CEO position at Victor's company. The distinction is critical." Arya rose to her feet. "I spent 5 years existing in his shadow. I will not spend the next 5 managing his wreckage." "Even if the company fails?" "Even then." A profound tranquility settled over Arya's entire being. Perhaps it was resolve, or perhaps it was the simple lucidity of truth. "I built it once. I can build something superior." Catherine regarded her for a long, silent moment, then released a laugh, a genuine, startled, and honest sound. "You know, I believe you actually will." She stood and extended her hand. For the record, I believe you are making an error, but I am compelled to respect it. Arya shook her hand. Thank you for the opportunity. Should you reconsider? I will not. Exiting Catherine's office, she felt lighter than she had in years. In the descending elevator, she drew her phone and texted Dante. It is done. Meet me at the curb. He was there, leaning against the vehicle as if he had all the time in the world. How did it proceed? He asked. They presented the CEO position to me. A pause hung in the air. I declined. While Dante's cool composure remained intact, a subtle shift occurred in his gaze. The reason? I have no desire to salvage Victor's collapsing enterprise. My goal is to construct my own from its foundations. She entered the vehicle, something that is mine from its inception. As Dante took the wheel, the motor roared to life. And what form does that take? The vision is not yet clear, but I will define it. Their journey led them to Jessica's law firm, where a formidable stack of documents awaited. Petitions for divorce, intellectual property claims, financial disclosures. Arya signed document after document until her hand ached. This is merely the opening salvo, Jessica cautioned. Victor's legal team will contest every point. We may be mired in litigation for many months. I am prepared. And you're certain about refusing the CEO role? That would have armed us with considerable leverage in these negotiations. I am certain. Jessica studied her with an intense look. Very well, it is your decision. But from my perspective, you are engaging in a high-stakes gamble. You are the third individual to voice that sentiment today. Perhaps, then, you should heed the warning. Or perhaps I am the sole person with clarity, while everyone else has lost their reason. Arya affixed her final signature to the document. What is our subsequent action? Now we observe Victor's strategy. He has 30 days to respond. Following that is discovery depositions. The entire ordeal. Jessica organized the documents into orderly stacks. My recommendation? Maintain a low profile. Allow the media storm to subside. Let Victor begin to feel the pressure. A plan is already in motion. We are leaving the city. Excellent. Remain away for as long as possible. Return when you are prepared for battle. The drive to the countryside consumed a full 3 hours. Arya observed as the urban landscape dissolved into suburbia, then gave way to vast fields, and ultimately, thick woodlands. Dante's retreat was a lakeside house, contemporary, yet understated. Constructed of glass and wood, it offered a view of the water that extended to the horizon. Is this your place for disappearing? Arya inquired as they arrived. This is where I come to recall what is truly significant. The interior was minimalist and pristine, offering comfort without extravagance. A fire was already laid in the hearth. The kitchen was fully supplied, and fresh linens were in the bathroom. How long is our stay? Arya asked. For as long as you require. She approached the window. The lake was a flawless mirror, reflecting the sky with absolute stillness. No observers, no photographers, no inquiries for which she was unready. I should be experiencing a sense of relief, she stated softly, but you are not. I feel as though I am a fugitive. You are not fleeing. You are repositioning. Dante moved to stand beside her. A critical distinction. Is it? Fleeing is to cede territory. Repositioning is a tactical maneuver. He paused. So, what precisely transpired at Catherine's office? Arya recounted the entire event, the proposition, the conditions attached, and her unequivocal refusal. While speaking, she observed his reflection, attempting to discern his thoughts. "Do you believe I made an error?" she asked upon finishing. "No. I believe you made the correct decision, but for flawed reasons." What is that supposed to signify? It signifies that rejecting the CEO position to create something new is a powerful move. Rejecting it because you fear you might fail is not. Arya pivoted to face him directly. "I am not afraid." "Are you certain?" "No, I am simply a She trailed off. What was she afraid of? Failure or success? Of becoming a reflection of Victor? "I am finished with being defined by him, accepting that role, managing his company. Even with immense success, I would remain in his shadow. The woman who repaired Victor Hale's legacy. I require my own creation." "Understood," Dante replied. "Is that all? Just understood?" "What would you have me say? That you are mistaken? I do not believe you are. That you should reconsider. You will not." A faint smile touched his lips. "You have made your move. Now you must stand by it." "How insightful." "I have my moments." Well, for the remainder of the day, they simply acclimated. Arya moved through the silent residence. Her luggage was unpacked, yet her thoughts were in disarray. Tranquility was a state she no longer understood. 5 years fixated on a single objective had eroded her capacity for simple being, leaving a strange residue of guilt. As dusk fell, her restlessness became unbearable. Dante discovered her on the deck, a silhouette against the setting sun. "Is the quiet unsettling you?" he inquired. "I cannot cease contemplating what comes next. After the legal confrontations, after the turmoil concludes." She folded her arms across her chest. "I dedicated 5 years to pursuing Victor's ambition. What is mine?" "What do you wish for it to be?" "I do not know. Something that creates an impact. Something that provides aid." A bitter laugh escaped her. "It sounds naive," he retorted. "It sounds human." "My expertise is strategy, identifying unseen opportunities, and solving intractable problems. Yet for 5 years, I applied that talent solely to enrich men who were already powerful." Her tone grew more resolute. "Perhaps it is time for a new kind of contest, a new objective." "Such as?" I am not yet certain. Perhaps consulting for firms nearing collapse. Startups with brilliant concepts but lacking business acumen. Enterprises led by women. By minorities, those the established network habitually ignores. The ideas gained clarity as she articulated them. I could establish my own firm, modest initially, highly selective, accepting only clients I genuinely believe in. That is hardly a plan for rapid wealth. It need not be in the beginning. I will receive a settlement from Victor. I have my own capital." She turned abruptly, her gaze meeting his in the fading light. "And I will have a partner who once expressed a desire to build something with me." "I did say that." "Were you sincere?" "I do not speak of things I do not intend." "Then commit to your words. Invest in me, in this venture, in this concept." A genuine spark of vitality animated Arya's expression, the first she had experienced since the gala. "You need to legitimize your own empire. This could be the method. Dante merely observed her, his face unreadable in the encroaching darkness. So, what is the proposition? Strategic consulting for the marginalized. I possess the expertise. You have the capital and the connections. We support the innovators, the women and minorities that traditional venture capitalists disregard. We take equity, not a fee. When they succeed, we succeed with them. And when they fail, we gain experience. The startup environment has perhaps a 30% success rate. But with the addition of true strategic guidance, that rate rises to 60. I have analyzed the data. Arya felt the framework of her new existence materializing in the stillness, a life that was finally her own. We would be selective, supporting only those with extraordinary potential. When we succeed, it will be decisive. And if we do not succeed, we fall together. Dante was silent for a moment as the first stars appeared in the evening sky. All right, he said at last. All right, I agree, but I have two stipulations. State them. First, we are true partners, equal shares, equal authority. I am not a passive investor who merely provides funds. Agreed. And second? He paused for effect. Second, you must eliminate the belief that you are inadequate for this. You constructed an empire from nothing once. You will do so again, but only if you believe it is achievable. A tension that had constricted Arya's chest finally released. Deal. They sealed the agreement with a handshake, a firm, conclusive gesture that initiated a new chapter. The subsequent days were a maelstrom of activity. Fueled by vast quantities of Dante's coffee, they worked from dawn until midnight, drafting business plans, pursuing potential clients, and constructing financial projections. Arya felt a vigor she had not known in years. This was not Victor's domain. It was not a pre-owned ambition. This belonged to her. On Wednesday, reality intruded. Victor has just filed his countersuit, Jessica announced, her tone strictly professional. It is malicious. How malicious? He is portraying you as a master manipulator, alleging you concealed your contributions to evade liability, that your brilliance is his property, and your compensation was the marriage, the estate, the lifestyle he claims he provided. Jessica's voice was frigid. He is contesting every single thing. I anticipated as much. I know, but this will be a protracted and brutal fight. His attorneys are formidable. This is proceeding to trial, Arya. It could last a year, possibly longer. Arya's gaze shifted to Dante, who observed her from across the room. Very well, she exhaled. Then we engage in war. Are you certain you could still accept a settlement? Take the money, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and vanish. I am certain. All right, I will begin trial preparations. Jessica hesitated. One other matter. The news of your refusal of the CEO position is public. It is widespread. One half of the world considers you a fool, the other, a hero. And what is your opinion? My opinion is that you are my client, and I will ensure that you prevail. When the call concluded, Arya was enveloped in a profound quiet. A year of legal combat. A year of Victor's legal team dissecting her life. A year of public scrutiny and judgment. Are you having second thoughts? Dante asked, his voice low. No, merely comprehending the full scale of the war I have just joined. She rose to her feet, stretching to release the tension. Her resolve was met with strategy. His declaration of support came with a list of potential clients for their new venture. In his hands was a document detailing 3 enterprises, each led by women, each struggling against the pressures of strategy and growth. It was, he suggested, a focus point for her. Arya's gaze devoured the names: a sustainable fashion house, a tech firm creating accessibility software, a food initiative serving impoverished communities. These were more than prospects. She realized they were affirmations. He acknowledged her unspoken thought. Their potential was precisely why he had selected them. She saw him then. Dante Moretti, a figure of the criminal underworld who entered her life through a fabricated engagement and had become an unlikely ally, a confidant, and something far more complex. A simple thank you felt inadequate. He dismissed it, reframing the gesture as the core of their partnership. Yet, it felt profounder than a business transaction. It was the sensation of being truly seen after 5 years of desolate invisibility. Sleep remained a stranger to Arya that evening. She found Dante on the deck, his attention fixed on the lake's obsidian surface. He too was awake, his mind occupied by strategic machinations. The plot he was weaving was a quiet one, the methodical dismantling of Victor's reputation, an operation designed to leave no trace of his involvement. Jessica, their counsel, was bound by the rigid confines of the law. He, however, was not. He then offered her a choice, a chance to insist his own methods remain untainted. She recognized the correct answer was to let the legal system run its course. Yet she was exhausted by a game where the rules were selectively enforced, allowing Victor to operate with impunity. She joined him at the railing, the cold metal a stark contrast to her burgeoning resolve. The secrets he mentioned were of a specific nature: illicit financial records, evidence of shell corporations, and proof of his pattern of co-opting the work of others. Arya was not, it appeared, the first person he had systematically erased. Dante's tone was glacial. Victor's history revealed a predatory cycle that needed to be exposed. The potential consequences were absolute ruin for him. Dante was unconcerned with the morality of it. Arya understood that his feelings were his own, but the choice to proceed had to be a conscious one. Weighing her own trauma and the coming battle, her response was unwavering. She demanded he unearth every hidden transgression. With her certainty established, they stood in profound silence, the moonlight fracturing across the water. In the city, Victor's world was beginning to unravel as his legal team scrambled. Here, in the quiet, Arya was constructing a new foundation, one that was entirely her own. A span of 3 months became a blur of legal preparation, opposition research, and the painstaking construction of her consulting practice. The nightmares of Victor's betrayal at the gala finally ceased. By the 12th week, she no longer kept count of the days. Her firm, Stone Strategic, a name Dante insisted upon as a reclamation of her identity, had secured its foundational clientele. The sustainable brand exceeded its projections. The accessibility tech startup secured its Series A investment. The food service expanded its reach to 2 additional cities. Arya's earnings were modest but growing. More importantly, her energy was invested in meaningful work with colleagues who valued her as a peer, not an apparition from a past life. Dante's influence was the critical catalyst. He provided access to investors who were serious, attorneys who were responsive, and financiers who treated her with respect. The title of Dante Moretti's business partner commanded a deference that being Victor Hale's former wife never had. Their feigned engagement proved to be an even more effective key. This was the one subject they consistently avoided. The engagement was a temporary, strategic maneuver for appearances. Yet Dante continued the pretense in professional settings, still wore the simple platinum ring matching hers, and would occasionally look at her with an intensity that defied their business arrangement. Arya dismissed it as meaningless, telling herself she was too immersed in rebuilding her life to consider a future beyond the finalization of her divorce. It was a practiced deception, a skill honed over years of self-preservation. The notice from Jessica arrived on a Tuesday morning in early November. Arya was in her small 3-room office downtown, analyzing data for a 4th potential client. Jessica's call was direct. A court date was set for January 15th, as the judge aimed to resolve the matter before the fiscal year's conclusion. This left them with scarcely 2 months for preparation. Victor's legal team was aggressively pursuing a settlement, a clear signal they anticipated a loss but hoped to mitigate the fallout. Arya put down her pen. The offer was $50 million, complete ownership of her intellectual property, and a non-disclosure agreement designed to permanently bury the affair. $50 million to effectively cease to exist. 6 months prior, she might have accepted the offer and disappeared. But she was no longer that person, a woman who believed that hiding was a form of safety. Her refusal was immediate. $50 million was an insult compared to his theft, and the NDA would silence her, preventing her from warning others or ever sharing her own narrative. Arya's resolve was absolute. No settlement. They would proceed to court. After a brief pause, Jessica agreed, summoning her back to the city for the intensive 2-month preparation period. When the call ended, the office was enveloped in a heavy silence. Beyond her window, the city thrummed with its own invisible conflicts. In 2 months, she would confront Victor, and every part of the new life she had built would be scrutinized under oath. A sense of terror should have consumed her. Instead, she was filled with a cold, focused readiness. Dante found her later that night at their shared apartment, the same space they had occupied since the gala, where their fake engagement had imperceptibly become a real, unexamined bond. He confirmed that Jessica had contacted him as well. The trial would begin in January. She was not just fine, she was better, acknowledging a need for this confrontation. He observed that 3 months ago, she seemed to want to vanish from the world. Now she appeared ready to incinerate the courthouse itself. She corrected him, specifying her target was not the institution, but Victor's entire public image. A fine distinction, he noted. He had more to share. His contacts had unearthed more evidence regarding the shell companies, revealing Victor's signature methodology of appropriating others' innovations while laundering the profits. The number of his other victims was at least 6, with more suspected. All had either been dismissed under suspicious circumstances or had simply vanished from the corporate world. His expression was grim. They had convinced 3 of the victims to testify if Jessica gave the word. A knot of dread tightened in Arya's stomach. He had ruined the careers of at least 6 individuals. Others were likely too intimidated to speak. Dante emphasized that the scope of Victor's actions went far beyond their personal conflict. It was a systemic fraud that had been operating for nearly a decade. The Securities and Exchange Commission was now investigating on a larger scale, with the board discussing potential criminal indictments. The charges could include wire fraud and tax evasion. If their findings were substantiated, Victor faced the possibility of incarceration. Arya braced for a sense of triumph that never came. Only a profound exhaustion. She questioned if they had taken things too far. He had no such doubts. While Dante admitted to past actions he regretted, he saw this situation differently. Aiding her reclamation and exposing a man whose empire was built on fraud was not a moral failing in his eyes. It was a form of justice. Even if it led to Victor's utter ruin, he contended that Victor was the agent of his own destruction. Their role, as Dante saw it, was merely to ensure the public had a clear view of the implosion. Arya considered his perspective, contemplating the line between retribution and justice and the unforeseen consequences of her campaign. She had been so fixated on recovering what was stolen, she hadn't considered the man who would be left in the wreckage. She then mentioned a recent chance encounter with Lena at a downtown coffee shop. Dante was intrigued. Lena had appeared lost, younger, and had attempted a tearful apology, insisting she was unaware of his marital status at the start of their affair. Arya believed it was a lie, but one that Lena herself had come to accept as truth. Dante found this perfectly logical, observing that people often revise their own histories to cast themselves as heroes, or at least to avoid the role of the villain. She posed the question of my hatred for her. Did I? No. What I felt was pity. At 24, she envisioned herself the protagonist in a fairy tale, chosen by a powerful man. She was now the affair partner in a scandal incinerating his career. Arya finally met his gaze. There was a time I craved her suffering. At the gala, I wanted her to know my exact pain. But now your humanity allows you to see she was also his casualty. Yet was she? She made a conscious choice, engaged in an affair with a married man. Arrived at that gala in a gown costing more than a person's rent, she can embody both victim and accomplice. The world rarely presents a dichotomy stark enough for a person to be only one thing. Dante emptied his glass. The salient question is, does her spectacle alter your position? Arya considered this. Did it? Lena's anguish did not negate her own. Lena's poor judgment didn't grant Victor a pardon for his far graver sins. No, she concluded at last, it alters nothing. I am proceeding to court. I am playing for a win, and I will ensure the world knows precisely what he orchestrated. Then your course is set. The subsequent 2 months were an absolute crucible. Jessica subjected Arya to punishing mock trials, vicious cross-examinations, and fabricated scenarios engineered to find her breaking point. They rehearsed her testimony until it was seared into her memory, deconstructing every document, email, and shred of proof. Marco assisted by portraying Victor's counsel, transforming into an exaggerated, patronizing figure designed to agitate her and provoke a mistake. So you assert you performed all this labor, he would taunt, his tone caustic, yet you sought no credit, nor demanded your name on the work. How remarkably advantageous. I was advised it was more favorable for the company if I remained unseen. By whom? By my husband, Victor, and you possess no evidence this conversation transpired. I have 5 years of emails where he explicitly instructs me not to attend meetings, to avoid investors, and to omit my name from projects. Emails that could be framed as a husband shielding his wife from the predatory world of business. Or correspondence that could be seen as a man methodically erasing his wife's professional existence to usurp her achievements. Marco's assault would be relentless. Jessica would interject, object, then pivot. They repeated these drills until Arya could deflect any cynical attack they launched. Dante was a phantom during some sessions, utterly silent. Jessica argued it was a poor optic for a fiancé to coach a witness, but he would sit in the back, observing. Later, he would bring her home and allow her to debrief. I genuinely wanted to strike Marco today, she would confess. That is the entire purpose. I understand. It doesn't make it any less maddening. Excellent. Wield that rage in court. Victor's actual lawyers will be 10 times more venomous than Marco. Let them infuriate you, then channel that fire into precision. The counsel was sound. Arya learned to transmute her anger into a weapon of absolute clarity, repurposing their inquiries as ammunition rather than letting them destabilize her. By December, she was an automaton. The week before Christmas, Victor's name illuminated her phone. After months of stark silence, Arya merely stared at the screen, nearly letting the call expire. But curiosity prevailed. "What is it you want?" she inquired. "Arya." His voice was a ruin, utterly spent. "I must see you. We have nothing to discuss. Anything you need to convey can go through Jessica. Please, just 5 minutes in person somewhere public." She knew the correct answer was no, that she should terminate the call and block his number, but she heard herself utter, "Where?" "That coffee house, the one near our former residence. Tomorrow at 2:00, agreed? 5 minutes." She ended the call before he could add another word. "You aren't seriously contemplating going," Dante observed. He had been in the doorway overhearing everything. "I am." "For what reason? I need to hear his words. What justification he's constructed. The narrative he is now telling himself, in which I am somehow the villain. This is a profoundly ill-advised idea. Likely, but my mind is made up." She looked directly at him. "You could accompany me. Occupy another table, to ensure he attempts nothing. He isn't going to try anything in a crowded establishment. Then there is no harm in your presence, is there?" Dante exhaled. "Very well. But if he reduces you to tears, I will shatter his jaw." An accord. The following day, Arya entered the coffee shop 5 minutes early, secured a table by the window in full view, and ordered a coffee she had no intention of drinking. Victor arrived precisely at 2:00. He appeared as if he'd been put through a grinder. He was gaunt, his suit draped on his frame, with dark hollows beneath his eyes. He had aged a decade in 3 months. "Thank you for coming," he began, taking a seat. "You have 5 minutes. I wish to settle," Jessica informed me. I declined. "Arya, please. This trial will decimate both of us. The press, the testimony, all that will be exposed. The only thing that will be exposed is the truth. If the truth frightens you, that is a predicament of your own making." Victor winced. "I committed errors. I acknowledge that. I should have given you attribution, should have regarded me as a partner, not a subordinate, should have honored my contributions, should have abstained from sleeping with your secretary." Arya's tone was utterly devoid of emotion. "Yes, Victor, there are many things you should have done. I was in love with you." "No, you were not. You were in love with my utility to you, a significant distinction." He fell silent for a moment. "I am going to lose everything, am I not?" "Correct. The company, my standing, perhaps even my liberty if the SEC pursues me." "Correct. And you are at peace with that?" Arya genuinely contemplated it, truly weighing the question. Could she truly witness the man she once adored be systematically dismantled? Observe his entire world burn to ash? "This was never an act of destruction," she stated, her voice a quiet snarl. "This is restitution for what you stole. 5 years of my labor, my concepts, my life. You wore it like a costume. You rendered me a ghost in my own narrative. You discarded me." Her gaze locked with his, entirely without warmth. "You forged this cage yourself, Victor. I am simply the one who possesses the key." He scoffed. "I can contest this, extend this for years, make it a protracted war." "Then wage your war," Arya retorted, rising to her feet. "But you will be defeated. I have the documentation, the witnesses, and the one thing you could never acquire, the truth. She was through the door before he could articulate a response. Across the road, Dante's vehicle was waiting, a silent extraction. She entered and they pulled away. "Are you all right?" he asked after a moment. As a matter of fact, yes. A strange sense of absolution washed over Arya. Witnessing Victor so diminished and vacant had finally put the old wound to rest. "He attempted to propose a settlement," she said. "Argued the trial would ruin us both." "And your reply?" "I told him to watch it all turn to cinders." A faint smile touched Dante's lips. "That's my girl." The words lingered. His girl, not his associate, not his peer, his. Dante. "I am aware. We need to address this. Address us. Whatever this arrangement is." His gaze remained fixed on the road. "When the trial concludes," he declared, "once the turmoil subsides, we can assign a name to this. What if I require that name now? At present, you require focus on victory, on reclaiming your world, on demonstrating you are not the ghost Victor made you." His gaze flickered to hers. "When you prevail, and you will prevail, we will discuss the future." The postponement should have angered her. Instead, a profound calm settled over her. One conflict at a time. She could manage that. Christmas passed in quiet. Arya spent it with Dante, Marco, and Jessica, an unlikely quartet that felt strangely correct. They exchanged gifts and drank wine, willfully ignoring the trial just 3 weeks away. On New Year's Eve, Dante hosted a small gathering for investors and supporters of Arya's endeavor. She wore the identical midnight blue dress, but felt entirely transformed, more formidable, more certain. As the ball descended, while others exchanged kisses, Dante located her on the balcony. "Formulating a New Year's resolution?" he inquired. "Attempting to. Mine never seem to last. Indulge me. I want to cease being fearful." "Fearful of what? Of success? Of failure? Of being seen?" She turned to face him directly. "For 5 years, I made myself insignificant because I believed that was the price of love. I need that to end now." "That is not foolish. That is courageous." "And you?" Dante paused, the city's lights reflected in his eyes. "I want to stop deceiving myself about the things I desire." "And what is it that you desire?" His gaze met hers, and an entire lifetime seemed to elapse in the quiet. Then he closed the distance and kissed her. It was measured, intentional, and had no place in their professional contract. When he drew back, her heart was racing. "We had an agreement. After the trial," she said, breathless. "I had an agreement," he amended. "You asked what I desire. That was the answer." A slight smirk formed on his lips. "But you are correct. After the trial, when your victory is assured, when this is all resolved, we will approach this properly. And what if I am no longer able to wait? Then do not. Yet you must understand this must be authentic if it proceeds. Not a public display, not a strategic merger. It must be 100% genuine." Something within Arya's core finally gave way. "Agreed." "Agreed? We'll do this properly after the trial concludes." They remained outside as the event faded, their dialogue forging a future that was a silent pact. January 15th arrived, brutally cold. Arya appeared in a gray suit, a form of armor projecting sheer resolve. Jessica met her on the courthouse steps. "Are you prepared?" her counsel asked. "As I will ever be." The courtroom was an absolute spectacle. The press section was overflowing. Victor's legal team radiated costly arrogance. The board was a scattered constellation of allegiances, the loyalists, the opportunists, and the mere spectators. At his council table, Victor seemed diminished and isolated. Lena was conspicuously absent, as were his former allies. He had incinerated his entire network with remarkable speed. The proceeding was a grueling 3-day ordeal. 3 days of sworn statements and merciless cross-examinations, exposing every sordid detail. Jessica moved like a predator, her methodical dismantling leaving Victor's own attorneys visibly defeated. Arya took the stand on the second day. Her responses were precise: no tears, no outbursts, nothing they could manipulate against her. When opposing counsel attempted to frame her as a manipulator, asking, "Did you not conceal your contributions to claim the credit later?" she met his gaze and stated, "No. I concealed my involvement at my husband's instruction. He claimed it was for the company's benefit. It was an act of trust in him." Following this, her corroboration began. 3 ex-employees presented identical accounts. He had appropriated their concepts, claimed full credit, and systematically ruined the careers of those who resisted. Financial experts traced the flow of money through various shell corporations. Marco himself testified that he had pursued Arya for years, as the industry consensus recognized her as the true visionary. Victor's defense was feeble. He spoke of communal property, of compensating her with a lavish lifestyle, of a collaborative effort, but the weight of evidence against him was an overwhelming force. There were the digital records, the legal documents, and the recorded meetings where her voice clearly commanded the room while he merely affixed his signature. On the third day, the court recessed. 2 hours later, Victor's lawyer initiated settlement talks. The proposal was $150 million, complete ownership of her intellectual property, no restrictive gag order, and a public acknowledgement of her contributions. Jessica regarded Arya. This is a substantial offer. A judicial ruling might yield less. What is your assessment? My assessment is that you have already prevailed. The truth has been laid bare for the world to see. This story has been dissected by every business journalist in the nation. Accepting the settlement simply expedites the conclusion. Arya considered her alternatives: the slow, deliberate process of a judge's decision against the swift path to liberation. Counteroffer, she declared, $200 million and a public apology. Furthermore, he must resign from every board, every executive position, every entity he is affiliated with. A complete professional erasure. A wide smile bloomed on Jessica's face. I will place the call. They finalized the agreement at $180 million, a formal apology, and Victor's total banishment from Hale Enterprises. The judge ratified the settlement before the day's end. Outside, before a barrage of cameras, Arya approached the microphone. I am thankful this ordeal is concluded. She recited from the statement Jessica provided. But more profoundly, I am thankful for the chance to present my narrative. For 5 years, I poured my essence into a vision, only to see another man affix his name to it. That era has ended. The truth has surfaced. My focus is now on ventures that bear my name and my name alone. From the assembled press, a journalist called out, "And Victor Hale, can you forgive him?" Arya paused, contemplating the very definition of forgiveness. Was it a gift to him or to herself? No, I do not forgive him, she stated at last. But I harbor no hatred for him. I am simply finished with him, finished with the space he occupied in my existence, finished with his actions defining my identity. Her gaze locked onto a camera lens. I'm constructing something new, something superior, and it will be entirely my own. She stepped away from the lectern. At the periphery of the pandemonium, Dante stood waiting. As she neared him, their hands intertwined. So, what is the feeling? He asked softly. Lightness. They departed the courthouse side by side. In their wake, the media frenzy erupted with inquiries and camera flashes. The narrative would dominate headlines for a time, but Arya never once glanced back. 6 months onward, Stone Strategic boasted 12 employees and 8 clients, with a waiting list of others desperate to engage her services. The fashion venture went public. The accessibility initiative was acquired by a tech conglomerate for $200 million. Arya's direct share was a significant $20 million. Her offices were now situated in the same high-rise as Dante's main operations. Distinct entities yet interconnected, partners in both commerce and life. The promise they had articulated became tangible around March, and they formalized it in April. An intimate lakeside ceremony, attended only by Marco and Jessica. No photographers, no extravagant celebration. Only the individuals who truly mattered. She retained her name, her autonomy, her drive to create. Victor vanished completely from public view. Reports suggested he was in Boston, a consultant for some minor firm, now taking direction from others. The descent from CEO to a subordinate must have been a bitter pill. Arya searched within herself for some trace of sympathy for him. She found none. Not all injuries fade, but one can always construct a new existence that eclipses the scars. One temperate summer evening, she stood in her conference room, gazing at a display of client portraits. Each represented a victory. Each represented a life she had transformed, a vision she had helped manifest. Dante approached from behind, his arms encircling her. Lost in thought, he inquired, just reflecting on the magnitude of the changes. Beneficial changes, the very best. She pivoted within his embrace. This time last year, I was an invisible force. Now, a smile touched her lips. I feel indomitable. He chuckled softly. I intended to say visible, but indomitable is also accurate. You have earned it. He kissed her brow. Let us go. Marco is here. He wishes to open champagne to celebrate the Castellane outcome. But we did not acquire Castellane. No, but 3 of our associates are now acquiring its division since it became available. Marco terms it poetic justice. Then again, Marco perceives poetry in market fluctuations. A valid point, but in this instance, he is correct. They exited together. In the reception area, Marco was already uncorking a bottle, despite it being only 6 p.m. A toast to Arya Stone, he proclaimed as they approached, for demonstrating to the world that true vindication is not merely winning, but building something so extraordinary that the person who wronged you fades into complete irrelevance. They touched their glasses. To victory, to new beginnings, to a future they were authoring themselves. And later, in the serenity of the home she co-owned with Dante, Arya observed the city lights ignite below. Somewhere in that urban expanse, Victor was likely consumed by his own resentment, convinced she had usurped him, utterly oblivious to the fact she had only reclaimed what was rightfully hers. Let him construct his self-serving narrative. Let him edit history to cast himself as the aggrieved party. She possessed the truth, she had endured it, and upon its foundations she had erected something of substance. Her phone illuminated, a message from a client, a young entrepreneur creating a firm to support disadvantaged communities. She had just secured her first significant round of funding. I genuinely could not have accomplished this without you. You have altered the course of my life. A faint smile graced Arya's lips. She composed her response. No, you altered your own life. I merely assisted you in finding the necessary implements. It was a lesson she had painfully learned about the nature of power. True power is not about dominance or appropriating credit or diminishing others to elevate oneself. It resides in the act of creation. It is about using one's own brilliance to help ignite another's potential. It is being noticed not out of a need for attention, but because one's presence inspires others to emerge from obscurity. Victor never grasped this concept. His paradigm of power was rooted in subjugation. He was fundamentally mistaken. Arya existed for 5 years as a phantom, constructing another person's ambition. Now she stood in the light, enabling others to construct theirs. That profound shift, from invisible to visible, from exploited to esteemed, from a ghost to a powerhouse, rendered every scar meaningful. Consider this. 5 years of her life were immolated for a man's ego. Yet from those embers, she was reborn as a formidable force. The uncertain woman from 6 months prior was an unrecognizable figure. That version of her was broken, betrayed, and defined by fear. This new incarnation was an entirely different entity. This was Arya, unconstrained, and she now understood that liberty is the most potent form of retribution. Dante's arms encircle her as he asks about her thoughts. Just contemplating how my greatest failure became my greatest triumph, she replies. How so? Victor's destruction of my world ultimately cleared the way for the life I was always meant to lead. She leans into his embrace. If he had not cast me aside, I would still be receding into his shadow to safeguard his fragile empire. Do you have any regrets? He inquires. She reflects on the fury, the immense effort, the courtroom battles, and the spectacle of Victor's downfall. No, she concedes finally. I lament that it reached that point, but I do not regret the struggle. I do not regret reclaiming my agency, and I certainly do not regret creating this. Good, he responds, because you are exceptional at it. She turns to face him. We are exceptional, we are partners. Partners, he affirms, before silencing her with a kiss. Outside, the city is a vast composition of 1,000,000 ambitions and 1,000,000 heartbreaks. Elsewhere, another woman is experiencing the fracture of her world through betrayal. Someone else is confronting her own erasure in the eyes of one she loved. Arya hopes they transmute that rage into reclamation, hopes they find their own internal sovereignty and refuse to be deleted. Because that is the true narrative. It is not about revenge. It is a hostile takeover of one's own existence. It is about seizing what is yours and constructing something so undeniable that no one can ever take it away. Victor's attempt to render her insignificant had backfired spectacularly. It had instead forged her into an indomitable force. This, Arya understood, was the only resolution that mattered. It was not the legal victory, though she achieved it, nor his downfall, though he was ruined. It was her own evolution into the protagonist of her life, a powerful figure beholden to no one. All that had come before was merely background noise,